This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, January 13th. This is the first of our annual budget workshop sessions. This morning we're going to be hearing from library. We'll then hear from community services and recreation, and then finally the fire department. Before I ask Sue to start, I just want to mention a couple things to the board and I guess to our audience and those at home. First of all, I wanted to mention for the members who I'm sure noticed, but also for others, there was a slight change in the presentation this year as compared to our prior years. In prior years, the department heads did not put new hires in the budget. They were generally discussed at these meetings, and then the board would decide whether or not they wanted to incorporate them. So it made it a little bit confusing in the past because we had, in a way, sort of two different budgets that we were operating with. So I was actually glad to see this year all the departmental requests are in the one budget. So in the document that we have, there are actually 12 new hires requested in the budget. Those, of course, will be discussed by this board over the next couple of months and eventually adjudicated. They have also included, I should say the finance department has included within the medical insurance portion of the budget, the number that we see in this document also includes medical insurance for those 12 new hires. If we don't hire the 12, there'll be some savings there. The other thing which isn't perfectly evident here is that we've elected to change the way we've done police outside duty. That was historically reported as a special fund within the budget, and then in our monthly meetings. I'm sure the members noticed if they looked at the police department line, the maintenance line has a substantial increase. That's because historically the police outside duty was used to offset maintenance expenses for our town vehicles. There will be, when we get the revenue side of the budget, which we do not have yet, which is typical, there will be a line that will be put in the revenue side of the budget for police outside duty. The Board of Selectmen has reviewed the budget, as they always do in January. We've received a letter from its three members, and I'll just say that, I'll just read the second paragraph. It's simple. The Board unanimously agrees that after review of the budget and taking into consideration the many challenges within, as well as the unknown revenue, the Board is hopeful that the Board of Finance can work to present a budget to the public with no more than a 1 mil tax increase. And then finally, there was discussion at our last meeting about having a mailbox so that members of the public, if they had any comments on the budget, could send their comments in. We do have that email address in place. It's on the town website under the Board of Finance, but I will give it here and at the next couple meetings so those at home and here do have the address where they want to use it. The address is Board of Finance. Board of Finance does not have to be capitalized, at northaven-ct.gov. Those emails will be directed to myself and they will be shared with the board at subsequent meetings. Having said that, we have Sue Griffiths here from our library. She's going to present the library budget.
Good morning, everybody.
Griffin. Sorry. Griffin. Sorry. I said Griffiths. Sorry. Right.
Before we begin, I would just like to thank. There you go. Is that better? Okay, good. So, good morning, everybody. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank. We have our assistant director, Shauna DeStefano, and members of our library board here. Our chairman of the board, Michael Fletcher, Marianne Hardy, and Ruth Bryant. So, thank you for your support and for coming here for the library. Okay. So I'm going to begin with some highlights and stats from this past year. I will tell you that this does span a little bit further than last fiscal year because a lot has happened in 2023 that do affect some of our requests here. So we've done quite a bit in our community this past year. And everybody does have a packet with this, so you could follow along, and you have it for your reference after. We've done quite a bit of large community events, including our Parent Resource Fair, where we had members of the community, like businesses and, like, say, daycares, doctor's office, and local groups, so that people who are new to our community or have young children, they don't know where to go. So this helps them learn a lot about our community. We have our summer reading festival, which we had well over 1,000 people attend that this year. We thought it was 800, went back and looked at our numbers, it was even higher. We've done a lot of work within our other community groups, like we did the Business Expo on the town green. We just did a giving tree this year at the library, which was a huge success. Members of the public brought in items to donate for our community services in North Haven. We brought 6 buckets? Yeah, 6 buckets, so it was wonderful. It was a great way to have our community come together. We've worked with our schools, and one of our things that we've talked about in our past requests was a library app. It keeps going up. I had to change this 3 times this past week. We now have 882 users, over 100 users in the past 3 months, and just 16 in the past week. So it's really a good success. Grants. We've applied for 2 grants and received them this year. One is a capacity grant from the Connecticut Humanities, and that's because the library doesn't have a strategic plan, and we're going to write our very first strategic plan. So that will kind of guide us over the next 3 years and help make some of the decisions and guide some of our budget requests if as we poll the community and find out what the community is looking for from the library, we're going to base where we're going on that. So we did get that grant for $9,990, and that's part 1 of for the plan. And that enables us to hire a consultant, and they're going to be conducting interviews, hosting focus groups. They're going to do all the data collection. We're going to do a community-wide survey. And the reason we really wanted to work with a consultant is, 1, we've never done this, and we're not experts in this field. We want to do it right. And 2, we want people to be able to give us unbiased information. You know, people may not say, hey, I don't like the library because of this, or I don't like the library's doing X, Y, Z. So it really is important to have independent entity conducting those interviews and focus groups. The other thing we have is the construction grant, which is $250,000, and I think everybody probably knows about this because we do have the town match on that, but we're really excited about the new construction that we're going to do within the library, so that's there.
So I just have one quick
Sure.
question about the strategic plan,
Sure.
because I noticed that you included in your capital improvement a line item for about $7,000 for the strategic plan consultant. So is that person paid by the grant, paid by the town, or some combination of the two?
Combination. So we got the grant for the consultant. It was $13,800, I think, to do all the background work. Mm-hmm. The second part, which we've asked, is to have them help us write and craft the plan. So we've never done this before. Mm-hmm. So trying to know where we're going to go for the next 3 to 5 years, we really want some experts to guide us. So that is what that part of the grant is. The request is for.
I see. And do you expect that will be an ongoing thing, or just a 1 year, write the plan and move on?
So we will continually revise it in-house. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a living document,
Yeah.
but it should. I'm not sure. 5 years is really difficult to try to forecast, so mm-hmm. we're probably going to be closer to 3. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that the next strategic plan after this strategic plan we can do ourselves. Okay. So I don't think we would need guidance. Probably 2 to 3 plans later, it might be great to have somebody come in and really do a community assessment.
Great.
Again.
Thank you for explaining that.
Sure. Okay, so our programming, we had 523 in-person programs this year, so we're up over 12%. I did compare us to peer libraries within the state, and I'll go over that a little bit in another slide. But we did 10% more compared to our peers. I mean, we had over 15,000 people attend our library programs this past year. That's amazing. So, and it's an 86% increase from last year. So it's wonderful. I already mentioned our large events, our summer reading festival, parent resource fair, and our summer reading programs. We continue to do those. We had 495 children, 133 adults, and 59 teens. And we do try to work with the rest of the community. So you'll see in the picture, like the police were at our parent resource fair. And it's wonderful to work with our other town departments. Our circulation is up, and our patron new card registration is up. So we did have a huge bump from the 2 fiscal years ago to the last year because we were closed for a little while. So that was expected to have a huge bump, but we've increased since. So that's pretty exciting that that's continuing to increase. Same with, I mean, we had 40% more increase in library card registration. So people are just continuing to use the library, and we're seeing new faces, which is wonderful. And so our peer library comparison, this I used the Connecticut State report, library report, and I based our peer libraries on angelic rating and population. And angelic rating is the wealth rating determined by the state of Connecticut, and it ranges from 1 to 169 because there's 169 towns. North Haven is 54. To give you an idea, Greenwich and Darien are 1 and 2, and Wyndham and Hartford are 168 and 169. North Haven is 54 on the angelic list. So the range we have is between 29 and 79 within our 5,000 population, 20 to 25. So if you look, we're doing a whole heck of a lot compared to our peer libraries with the budget and the staffing that we have. So most libraries have more full-time staff than us, and they do have more part-time and full-time. The FTE, full-time equivalent salary for North Haven is $54,323, and our peer group at $65,000. So we are 17% lower than our peer group. Our budget is last year's fiscal budget $1,298,000. So we were 13.5% lower than the average in our peer group, as well as our materials line, which is our big, that's where we buy our books and reference material databases. That was 12.5% less. So, and our programming, I mean, we're doing 523 programs on a budget of around $10,000, and 2 of the libraries in our peer group have $30,000 in their program budget. So we're making do. So that, I just wanted to show you this so that you could see a lot of our requests, I think, are pretty minimal, and we're going to, try to stay on this path, but we're doing a lot with our existing budget. Does anybody have any questions about any of that?
Can you explain what the 4-6 means in the beginning under staffing?
Oh, we're 4 out of 6 libraries have more full-time staff than us.
Okay.
And then 5 out of 6 have more part-time.
Thanks.
Sure.
So I have a question too, because being a member of the Friends of the Library, I know they provide a lot of funding to you.
Yes.
Is that put into consideration under any of your programming needs for this, or is that over and above?
That's over and above. It is accounted for in our state report. But yeah, we don't even, the program budget that we have doesn't cover everything. So we continue to ask the Friends for funding for programming. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I want to say that for programming, they probably give us $5,000 to $8,000 more.
Okay.
And we use the Friends budget for programming for bigger ticket items like concerts. Those programs typically cost like $400 to $500. just because there's more people and bands are more expensive to hire. So we go to the Friends for some of the bigger things like that. Sure.
Where'd you say that this data comes from? Is it Angela?
The angelic rating?
Yeah.
It's from the state of Connecticut.
Okay, so all this information is within that same data source?
Yes. You're welcome to look at all of them. It's on the Connecticut State Library.
Okay.
I don't remember where it is, but I can get that to you.
And they select who is within our peer group, is that correct?
I did. What I did is I just identified the same population, 20 to 25,000. We fall within that. And then the angelic rating, I went 29 to 79 because we're right in the middle.
Okay. All right.
So-
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And we all fill out our, every library is required by the state law to fill out this Connecticut report every year.
Good.
Okay. Okay, so to our budget request. This is the overall sheet, which I just put in here for your reference. I'm gonna just skip that, but it is here. One of our biggest line items that is not staffing is Lion. And I just figured I'd give you a little bit of background because you may not know why we're spending $55,000 on Lion. And there's two things that fall within our Lion line. One is the Connecticut Education Network, and they provide our internet usage for the library. So we have a direct line. We are off the town's network, which is really important. And we get that. So we also receive a 50% discount because we are SIPA compliant. And so that is, I think 4,100 of the line is for CEN. The other part is our subscription, our membership in Lion. And if anybody uses the library, if you borrow books from our library and you can't get it, you get it from another Lion library. And you usually have it within a week, as long as it's not like, you know, the bestseller that there's a million people on the hold list for. So we are in the, there's 31, we just had East Lyme or East Lyme just joined, Lyme just joined Lion, so we do now have 31 member libraries. They went live last week, so I apologize that this says that there's 30. But we share our library software, which has everybody, all the libraries together. It's also our online catalog. So when you go to the library catalog and you see all the different libraries listed, that's what PICA is. We have a delivery service within our own, within Lion. And that came about because about 5 or 6 years ago, the state completely cut their funding and stopped their, they stopped delivering to all the libraries. But it is a Connecticut state statute that you have to lend items to anybody in the state. So how do you get the books back and forth when people are bringing their books back to you? And we just needed the service, so we have our own delivery service, and it's wonderful. We have an IT support team that they do all the software for the consortium, as well as come to our library, and they do work with Alex. It's a really nice relationship, and they are responsible for our email system. And just so you know, if we broke out all the services that Lion provided, I did a conservative estimate. It would basically cost us, if we did this individually without the group, $224,000. So, and I checked with Alex on the cost of if we did have our software. Like I did a little bit of research to make sure these numbers, you know, it's probably closer to $250,000 is what it would cost us.
Sue, if I could interrupt.
Sure.
This item, I understand it's a big item that we're not paying for, but the actual increase here is pretty de minimis. Do you mind if we move on to some of the bigger
Sure.
items where we have an actual
Yep.
larger increase?
Yep. So the books, magazines, and reference line is 8,200 is our request. 4.35 is the inflation rate as of when I made this. So that's what I used. I also asked for an extra 1,200 for Hoopla and 2,000. Believe it or not, people steal books from the library, which seems like an odd thing because you can borrow them. But I don't know if they're selling them on Amazon or what, but they take our brand new books and they're expensive. So this actually just went up, but we have had at least 80 books since we realized they were getting stolen, so there's 2,000 to replace those. And our Hoopla is our downloadables that are not through Lion, and our bill in December was $1,784. I had budgeted $1,200. So I just wanted to add a little bit more for Hoopla. Any questions?
Thank you.
Our personnel line, we do have union contract obligations, and the one ask that I have for full-timers this year is to have our circulation librarian go from a 1 to a 2, and that all the part-time staff in the adult department report to me, and our children's department, they report to the children's librarian, and it's, the amount of, I need somebody on site to manage the small problems, it just would be much more efficient to have the little fires put out if there are any, or manage the problems at hand. It's a little awkward now that if there's any problems, I have to step in. So I am asking for our circulation librarian to change it to access services librarian, which will be a management position. And I included in that would also be some collection development in a specialized area, and I would, the current staff member also picked up more duties last year, so he's already doing some of the duties with interlibrary loan. For part-time, I did want to add one part-timer. We have a lot of people leave because they're like students, and they come to our library to learn, but they get full-time jobs. So we're down, and it's very difficult when we're just short-staffed. And after COVID, one of the positions, we didn't rehire that person. We hired back 12 instead of 13, and we're short-staffed on Saturdays. So this would help alleviate our Saturday short-staffed issues. There was also minimum wage increase, which our pages are minimum wage. And then our summer staffing.
Wait, Sue, I have a
Sure.
quick question about that. So regarding first personnel part-time, and then I'll get into summer staffing. So I looked at the numbers, and at end of year 22-23, you only used about 85% of your part-time staffing line item. Nonetheless, for the current fiscal year, we increased that line item by $13,000, and at least as of the end of November, the percent used was about 34%, as opposed to 5/12, which is 42%. So now you're asking to increase it by another 6% because you want to add another person. So in contrast with what you're saying in terms of the understaffing, that line item has not been fully utilized, at least in the last year and this year to date, up until the end of November. So
We haven't been fully staffed, and unfortunately, the hiring takes about 3 months, and we had, I think, 3 different people leave last year. So when you have 3 months times 3 open, you're not paying people in that position. So if we were fully staffed, this is 18 hours for each part-timer to work every week.
meaning you had a position, but it wasn't filled.
Correct.
You had a
3 different
budgeted-
times.
You had a budgeted position that wasn't
Correct.
filled. Let me say it that way. Okay. And now you're expecting that you should be able to fill those positions even though you haven't in the past.
Well, it just takes a while, between posting and the time that they actually start, it's usually at least 3 months, and it's a tough process. We're just not getting the best candidates necessarily, and then once we do, they have to go through like background checks and all that
No,
stuff. So,
I'm just trying to understand whether you anticipate being able to fill
I
those
sure hope
positions
so.
if they are in fact funded. Because
Yes.
they weren't filled for a whole year, and they haven't been filled for a half a year so far this year.
Yes, we
that's
just,
my question.
somebody started about 6 weeks ago.
Okay, great.
It's the first time I've been fully staffed since I started for more than 2 weeks.
Okay, great. Next is summer staffing.
Yep. So summer staffing looks like a huge increase on the budget line, and there's 2 reasons for that. One is because the commission secretary position, that was the library secretary's meeting minutes, that got moved into this line because it's summer staffing and overtime. So summer staff, the full-time staff does get paid overtime when they work in the summer, but we often get invited to events and like the Business Expo, and I have to pay somebody overtime to work that. And so I'm asking for more money to cover that, as well as when we do have people call, I mean, we had 3 different people out sick. I was on desk yesterday. And that's not a problem. I love covering the desk, but it's, I couldn't do a lot of other work. So I would love to be able to offer part-time, I mean, a full-timer, like, can you stay an extra hour to help us out? So there's money in there for that as well.
So again, looking at the numbers for summer staffing / overtime, in 22-23, you only utilized about 67% of that line item. As of the end of November, that percentage has skyrocketed. It's up at, almost 90%, even though we increased the line item by $1,000 in the current fiscal year. So you want to increase it by 42%? Is that my understanding?
Well, part of that is the other line got put into this line, so it's not a full 42. I mean, it is 42 when you look at it, but if you look at Commission Secretary, there's a line, a dash there.
Yeah, but
So-
it's $500.
Right.
So it's.
Right.
Okay, if I could, this is $5 a day. Let's move on, please.
Okay.
Office supplies, this, in the past, our Xerox copy money was being added to the library budget. Anytime copies in print jobs. So it was equivalent to about $3,500 a year, and you can't add to the town budget, so that has been reallocated. So we really essentially lost about $3,500 this year. So I'm asking for that, but a $750 increase from that. So that's where the 42 comes in. Maintenance.
So,
of-
if I could,
Sure.
I'm sorry, you said you're no longer receiving the library's print copy deposits? Mm-hmm. Those are going
They're
where?
going to the general fund,
And how much was that?
about $3,500.
That's a third, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. So, maintenance of equipment, we just need some more software. Electricity, last year we went up 7.23%, so I just used that number. Custodial, small increase there. And dues and expenses, this is the one that, I do want to add a staff training portal at $700. In-person meetings, so a couple years ago, everybody met via Zoom. Now there's in-person meetings, so I have to pay for mileage. And the other thing that I would like to do is, we've never attended professional conferences, and that's how you stay current in your field. So I really would love to be able to send me or one of the staff to a professional conference, which is ALA or PLA. And I looked yesterday, and they're between $600 and $700 for the conference, but there's travel involved. So there's flight and there's hotel and food. So I would just love to have a budget to attend the conferences. And then that's pretty much it. So we go to our capital request, which we've discussed.
Let's just
Sure.
pause for 1 second before we move off expenses. Just ask the members if there's any questions for Sue on the expense portion of the capital.
Just one quick one. I just want to know, well, why the printing income is going to the general fund now instead of offsetting the cost of printing?
That's probably where it should have gone in the first place.
Yeah,
That's the answer.
accounting. The accounting wasn't necessarily, it was somewhat improper in the past.
Okay, I didn't know if it was a recommendation from an auditor or...
We are auditing and revising all of our lines
Yeah.
and including proper procedures of
Okay,
accounting
yeah.
for funds.
All right,
Thank you, Ingrid.
okay.
All right, capital, please.
Okay, so the strategic plan, which we've discussed, I can answer any further questions, but that's a little bit of a breakdown of what part 2 would include, so that's the consultant in there. And then when we do our new construction,
Sue, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So sort of get back to Nancy's question before. Do you see this as a one-time item, or do you think it's going to be repeated? Because it is a little bit of an operating expense.
oh, no, it's one time.
Okay.
I mean, there might be a possibility if we ask for a consultant in, I don't know, maybe 10 years?
I won't be here in 10 years, I can assure you that. Let's just stick with next year.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, go on.
You're
Well,
welcome.
Tim, I agree with you, and I think that item should be placed into the
Yeah.
operational budget and
Yeah,
take
it's
it out
not
of
really
capital.
capital.
It's not a capital item.
Right.
Well, but if I went up $15,000 on my budget, my material line, you
I
might,
suppose you have a good point there in terms of acceptability.
and
by
it,
the
because,
public.
right, and it's a one-time, cost, that's why I didn't feel, if you want to bump our budget line $7,200, and then next year, that would be lovely.
All right, we'll hash out whether the money gets allocated later and where the right spot is for it,
Okay. And then we did actually have, in last year's 5-year plan, all of our computers being replaced for the adult. I talked to Alex, and we could push that off. Our computers are in great shape, so we didn't need to add that this year, but we are asking for 2 Macs. When we do our new teen department with the construction, we're putting 4 computers there, and we're going to use 2 of our existing PCs, and we're going to add 2 Macs.
How many computers do you have?
Right now, we have 13. When we do the new construction, we're going to move 12 over, and we do have one that we can use that's not part of our public computers.
So,
So we'll have 12 in the adult area, and we'll have 4 in the teen area.
and 2 of those are going to be the
Max.
Macs, right?
Correct.
And those are expensive.
Yes.
Those computers are expensive. What about iPads?
We do have iPads,
Yeah.
but you can't, it's harder to do like iMovie, and there's a couple different things that and the teens have specifically
Oh,
requested
of course
this.
they want, because
No.
it's Apple.
Yes. Yeah, but mostly
Yeah.
for the software.
Okay. I would imagine those are like kind of locked up. Like, those would be something that would somebody would want.
Well, we have all of our public computers out now, but they're being a study, Carol, they're not going to be laptops. They're desktops.
Desktops,
So,
okay.
and I think if they're really the screen, I would
Yeah,
hope we'd
okay.
see
They're
somebody walking out
desktops,
with
yeah,
them.
no one's going to walk out with
Yeah,
a
they're not
desktop
laptops.
with a laptop, okay. Just checking, because
It's not a bad point.
because my daughter's has them for school, and I'm like, you need to lock that thing in your dorm, because you don't know who's going to come in there and swipe it.
Yes,
So
yes.
those are the hot commodities. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody have any other questions? Okay, thank you.
I got a
you, Sue.
philosophical one. What do you think has been the biggest activity, purchase, or whatever that made an impact with the library this year?
I do think the app was huge. When I've covered desk, one of the best things is somebody comes in and they're like, oh, I forgot you need to have your library card or your license to take out a book or anything. And a lot of parents leave that in the car. And so I'm like, but everybody has their phone. And so just having there's a library card built into the app, so all you have to do is scan it. And it's the little stuff like that, and there's a lot of research that people are using apps in their phones way more than, they're just not going to like the website or the catalog. So they're much more likely to use an app. So it's great that we're on the cutting edge of that.
Okay, thank you.
Tim, I'd like to ask my annual question. It's rained a little bit lately. What's the status on the roof?
Roof is doing okay, and it's funny because Tim had asked earlier, and I said, wait a minute, that's Mr. Hallahan's question, the roof.
I can't get up there. It's too steep.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do have an aerial view. I got a quote yesterday, so I can show you a picture. But we're doing okay. We do have money that was bonded so that we can get our roof repainted, but working with a company now, we're hoping that we can add a silicone coating that has a 20-year warranty, but I made them go back and add repairs, so while they're up there that they fix anything that they see, the gutters, the leads, the whole bit, so we're almost there.
All right. She's good. I'd keep her.
And Sue, as far as you know, the custodial contract, you feel as though is going to be pretty much what is budgeted for the current year, and
I did ask them specifically for their quote. We did just go out to bid, and I believe that signed the town contract. So that money includes their minimum wage increase, so nothing should happen. We do have occasional spills, problems that we need to call the custodial company in for, so there's a very small increase for that. If we need to call for emergency cleanups.
right. And the expectation on the completion of the $250,000 construction grant is when?
I'm hoping the end of 2025. It might go over a little bit depending, like the generator that we would have It takes a while, I think, like up to a year to come in, and we have a couple steps before we're able to actually begin any construction. I anticipate that happening starting in the fall.
Great. And any of the new furniture that will be displaced and replaced with, proposed furniture as part of this grant, that will be repurposed elsewhere in the library?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will tell you that a lot of the furniture that we have, though, I mean, it's quite old. So some of it is literally on its last legs. So there might be one or two things that will not be able to be repurposed. That will be replaced.
Got it.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Best value in town.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you to the library board.
Are we doing time-wise? I wanted to be done by 9, I'm so sorry.
Sue, do me a favor, just hit your mic there, because I think you're going to talk from there, Ingrid. You're going to talk from over here? Yeah.
Okay. Would you like me to leave the HDMI plug? You know if anybody else?
The fire chief might need it.
Want to get some water?
Yeah.
I might, yeah, I am.
Sue, is that your cord?
It is, but we
Well, Ingrid will hold it for you. Yeah. All right, if our guests could sit down, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit down.
We have a movie that we need the HDMI cord for. I might be able to get you a new one.
Paul will probably bring this.
People might have one.
Yeah, just take it.
All right, thank you. Ingrid is here for Community Services and Recreation.
Miss Nancy's getting water.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. I didn't see she
One
ducked
second.
out behind me. Oh,
Just grab
sorry,
it
hold on
over.
1 second.
Yeah.
I think we're all set, Ingrid.
I'll start with community services, if that's okay.
What page is that, Ingrid?
33.
33, thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. For our full-time line, we have a 3% increase. This is due to contractual increases in personnel, and we're also going to be moving, if you can flip for page 44, we're going to be moving a senior clerk position to a secretary. So you'll see the move there from a 2-person to 3, and the senior clerk from 1 to 0. This is due to increase in workflow, helping the community in need to fill applications related to SNAP, disability, Medicare, and Medicaid. He's going to be added extra responsibilities.
And the net change associated with that is about $7,700, is that correct?
Yes.
And
But it's also due to contractual obligation changes. For those,
I
it's
think
gonna.
Nancy's referring to just the job change, not
Oh,
the...
Yeah,
yes, the
yeah,
job
just
change,
because you're
yes.
eliminating one position and you're effectively promoting someone to a new position.
Right, to be, yes.
Right, so the body count is the same.
Right.
But the
But we're
net
just
effect
promoting one
is
person.
you're decreasing by 51,000 and increasing by 59,000, right?
Yes.
So, got it.
That is for our full-time line. Our overtime, it's $500 increase. This is due to cover sick days. Our office supplies line, It has a 14% increase, but there's also $500 due to increase in cost of supplies. And our professional consultants, this is BH Care. We have a contract, and that's the increase of the contract.
Is the contract up this year, Ingrid? When's the contract up?
We just signed the contract, yes.
Okay. Is it multi-year or is it year to year?
I have to look into it.
Okay. Multi-year,
Multiple
okay,
years.
thank you.
And I also provided, for reading, information on community service, senior center, and recreation. I will go over capital when we're done. This is for community services. Any questions? We'll move on to senior center.
Just one quick question about, on page 44, about community services. The Director of Community Services, that is Richard Monaco, correct?
Yes.
Got it. And likewise, the Director of the
Senior center, yes.
Where is that? Sorry, Manager, Senior Center, that's also Rich Monaco?
Yes,
Not inconsistent with what Ed was getting paid.
right.
Thank you, Ingrid. Go ahead.
Okay.
So you're now doing,
So for senior center, I'm just going to give some highlights on personal. Our longtime Judy, our longtime director, she was loved by many in the community. She has officially retired. She is on call as needed basis, as this is going to be an ongoing transition. This is why you guys will see some money still in our overtime, in our
part-time.
part-time line, yes.
So she is going from full-time
She was,
this year to part-time next year? At-
no, she was in our part-time line last year as
in
well.
the current-
We did not
current
have
year.
that, but it's going to be reduced. We just kept some
Further.
dollars there just for as needed basis.
So she's
We-
retired, but on-call?
Yes.
And
yes,
on-call is considered $50,000?
She is, well, the rate, yes,
Wow,
yes.
okay.
I think the question would be, does she have specific duties? She's not just on call. I'm assuming that she's going to be doing specific things for us.
We don't anticipate the full line to be expanded, but when we need her, she's gonna be there. We're really short-staffed right now in the senior center.
So because she's part-time, this dollar represents an hourly amount times a certain assumed number of
Right.
hours.
Yes.
Okay.
We will be adding a new position in the senior center. It's called the assistant manager. We'll see that. The other lines are contract-driven.
Can we just
And-
hold, and can you tell us some more about the assistant manager before we move on, please?
Sure. She is going to be training, Judy's going to be training her for her position.
And that's a full-time position?
This is a full-time position, yes. And then the program coordinator, you'll see that increase there because she is going to be going from 35 to 40 hours for added responsibilities.
Ingrid, the program coordinator is different than the assistant manager?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. The new position this year will be the assistant senior center manager. And this is gonna, with the market right now, it's really hard getting somebody in, so we're not sure when we'll be able to hire this person. So this is when Judy comes in and helps out. The senior clerk and the driver, those are contract-driven increases.
Just so I understand, what vehicle does the senior center driver drive?
Gotta be the bus, right? We have a
It's a
bus,
van,
right?
right?
That's the van, and we need to, we have a grant.
Is that operational?
Yes.
It
We're
is.
just trying to keep it going as long as we get our new bus. We do have an ARPA grant for a new bus, and we ordered the bus, and the bus will be coming in a year. But we are trying to do our best keeping up with the van that we have currently.
And was that paid for with ARPA?
Yes, we have a combination, we do have an ARPA grant for that.
Okay.
It was approved and the bus was ordered.
Right, it's just that was on, it was off, it was on, it was off, so I wasn't
Yes,
quite sure where we
it's
landed
really
on
hard to
that.
try to get vehicles.
Got it.
Okay, we'll move on to our part-time line. This is Judy's support for the senior center. And you'll see a decrease too in overtime by adding the position and increasing that person from 35 to 40 hours. We also did a small increase in the car allowance since we're not gonna need that as much. Our custodial contract, the increases is per minimum wage. The minimum wage went up. And the bus, as I said, it was ordered. Those are the increases that you see in the senior center right now.
It seems like a pretty big jump in the custodial contract due to minimum wage, 17%.
Yes, we just went out to bid. They were our lowest bidder, and the increase was due to minimum wage, and we also have added dollars there for emergency spills and anything that happens, they need to get extra calls for that. We can move on to recreation. if you have-
Just check, any questions from other
Any
members
questions?
before we move on?
Sure.
All right, hearing none, go right ahead. What page is that, Ingrid?
Page 35
Thank you. Guess I should know that tab.
and 45 on the employment schedule.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to our full-time line. It has a 4% increase. This is contract-driven, and it includes a step increase. Our part-time line, this has the big jump of 52% increase. This was for needing extra hours to cover evening meetings. If you see in our packet that I hand out, I listed all the meetings that we support in our recreation department. This was to cover that. We have had tremendous difficulty getting lifeguards this year. We had to increase their wages to be more competitive from $15 to $18 with the market as they need extra hours to cover the pool programs that we offer. This includes also, this 52% includes our pool instructor coach, the summer programs. We also, per a state mandate, we had to hire a nurse to be able to run the campground programs. And adding this extra part-time hours will reduce getting overtime of our staff.
You said the part-time position line will help with overtime, but overtime is increased on here too.
The overtime, right. If you see, the actual is $32,000 actual.
Oh, I see what you're doing.
Yes. So yes, it's increasing accordingly to their wages, but essentially it will decrease because our year-to-date numbers
Okay.
are very high. We needed that extra support.
So with respect to that particular increase, the part-time increase, that's about a 52% increase. In 22-23, we spent about $114,000 on that line item. We budgeted 95, so it was over, but just so you, as a reference point. And this year, we're on track to spend about 125,000. So 154 seems like a pretty substantial jump there, even with the increase in the cost of lifeguards and nursing, particularly with respect to the fact that I've noticed that the revenue stream from community services has actually been declining from year to year. So I think we need to be pretty cautious about this, at least in terms of a particular department. I certainly
This is
value
happening
recreation in our department, don't get me wrong about that, but.
Right, this is happening to a lot of our departments where we have a backlog where we're not fully staffed. So that's why you see less amounts in previous years or previous months. Once we get fully staffed, you'll start seeing those increases.
Nancy, I was flipping pages unfortunately while you were speaking, so I
Sure.
apologize if I'm repeating something you already said, but, so it looks to me like the overtime line is already almost fully expended through November.
Right.
We've already expended 13,000 of the 15. I apologize if that was your point, but we're going to run over on that line for sure this year.
Yes.
Overtime, yeah, I
Yeah.
was more talking about the actual part-time line item.
Oh, the part-time, okay.
Do you have a sense for the number of part-time employees? I don't, I don't see a number in parentheses following part-time there. And I understand it covers a wide variety of different positions.
Yes, I could get that number for you.
Okay.
Part-time is running over too. It's running 10% over too.
Yes, again, it is, at least if you project it forward,
Right.
it should be about 125,000, which is in excess of the current budget, but it's a number to just keep in mind relative to the number that's proposed here, which is 155,000.
Right.
And Ingrid, just so I understand again who the people are, you said you're going to get to me the number of part-time, but the Assistant Director of Park and Recreation and the Assistant Director of Recreation and Pool, who are these people? Just so I know, one I assume is Andy.
Andy, and I believe the other one is Jen. Is it Jen?
Jen.
Jen, yes.
And the Program Coordinator?
Program coordinator.
John
That's
Bamonte.
John.
John.
Bamonte.
That is John Bamonte. Okay, got it. All right, thank you. That's helpful.
We don't see any other increases in the lines except for our summer program, Exceptional Children. This is a Special Olympics program. It's a basketball program, and it's based on the enrollment of the children. Any other questions on that?
If there's none, let's just, is there any, do we have capital for that?
Yes, we do.
Oh, community, yeah, I see it. That's page 38.
For capital, we're asking for replacement of some chairs. We did replace some last year, but we need to replace others that are in really bad condition. We don't want to cause any safety issues on that. And the senior center needs painting. This painting is for the senior center. That's for $20,000. And our pool maintenance and repairs, that line we have every year for the pool. We did recently install in the pool a meter chlorine system that's gonna help us keep up expenses.
What was it? I'm sorry.
For the pool, we just recently installed a meter for chlorine.
Oh, meter farm.
Yes. It's gonna help us save some money on chemicals.
Okay. Do any of the members have any questions for Ingrid on community services and recreation capital items?
Just, it seems to me that recreation center maintenance is something that it seems to be a vulnerability point for us consistently. How confident are we that keeping the exact same number of $30,000 is the way to go?
We're hoping that with the repairs that we've done, we can keep it as that. It is a tight budget. We don't have a crystal ball what's gonna happen in the future. We are doing our best to keep up with everything.
So Ingrid, we have a operating line for pool equipment and maintenance, and we have a separate line under capital for?
Yes,
Yes, I ask that frequently.
yes,
Yeah, so it's for the summer shutdown, isn't it?
yes.
Yeah, for the, yeah.
Which one's-
One is ongoing maintenance and one is.
One is a
one
yearly
is
maintenance
annual-
that happens.
An annual
Right.
maintenance period, or,
So I'm assuming the capital one is the annual maintenance period?
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
And the AC in the gym, the work that's been done has just really been to repair the existing system, but
Yes.
it looks like there's a proposal to replace it over the course of 2 years. Is that kind of a gradual
Yes,
replacing zones, or,
the replacement of,
because at least
AC,
under
yes.
capital, it looks like it's, no, I'm sorry, that's all this year. Right?
let me see,
And there's nothing more that needs to be done for that?
not right now, no.
Okay, so that's just a one-time payment, and hopefully
Yes.
there's nothing beyond that. Okay, that's my question.
Any other questions by the members? If not, thank you. Why don't we take a 2-minute break while the chief gets set up for his presentation? Okay, thank you, everyone. We're back after a short recess, and we have Chief Paul Januszewski with us, with a few of the members of the board to give us the fire department budget.
Great, thank you all for your time. I'm going to get started, and I'm hoping that we should be able to get through this rather quickly on my end.
Sorry, your mic.
All right, so like I normally do, I like to cover kind of where we've been since the last time we had a budget workshop and kind of cover some of the highlights of the last calendar year, fiscal year. And so since we last presented, we've renewed the contract with Nelson Ambulance. That is working out really, really well. I don't think that we necessarily give enough credit to the service provided through Nelson Ambulance and through that contract that we have in place. We revised the contract. We made very few modifications to it. It's a 3-year contract that we agreed to with Nelson. They're providing incredible response to our community. And the unique thing about this is there are ambulances that are dedicated to North Haven. And so unlike what we had prior and unlike some of our surrounding towns still today, the ambulances are regional assets. These ambulances are dedicated to North Haven, primarily for North Haven incidents. Now, there are some caveats to that occur from time to time, but for the most part, Nelson Ambulance is our sole provider 95% of the time. When you look at surrounding towns, they're struggling with what we were struggling with prior to our agreement with Nelson, which is ambulances responding from long distances away and ambulances not dedicated to the community. And so for the most part, we're doing really well there. And so we were happy to sign a new contract, and it's worth noting that between having our own dedicated ambulances to North Haven and having the EMD process with dispatch, we are able to shave off roughly 1,200 calls that the fire department would otherwise normally respond to, because we can send just an ambulance, knowing that our communication center is in contact with the ambulance to ensure a response through radios. Our CERT team continues to be one of the busiest teams in Connecticut. You see them every Tuesday night on the concerts. For those of you that go, you see them in a lot of our public events. They're usually wearing the green vests. They're a group of dedicated volunteers. We put them in a bus that they're able to respond with for rehab and for public events and so forth, and they're doing a phenomenal job. Our training tower at Northeast continues to kind of take shape. The tower is complete. We've started to put some Connex boxes there for some additional training opportunities, and through our state representatives and senators and Mike's leadership, we've been able to secure the 4-bay garage that will go up there soon. Otherwise, we're still working on our RMS, which is first due, which this board supported financially last time we came up here, and we discussed what the product was and how it would benefit the community. And so that has been rolled out in the last few months, and we'll talk more about that at some point as we go through it today. Otherwise, school evacuation drills continue to take place through the Emergency Management Office, and so we're actually evacuating every school in town, and we have about 3 or 4 schools down at this point with more to go. I'm going to get into the operational lines of our budget. These should be reflected in the handouts that you have. And so office supplies, a $5,000 increase is sought there. And it's important to note this line supports all of the administrative functions of the department, the fire marshal's office, some training, paperwork, copier, supplies, etc. Part of this line was supported through central facilities. Particularly copy paper was one of the things that were supported through central facilities. That's being shifted now from central facilities to the individual budgets, department budgets, and so that's a big reason for that increase. Promotional testing, this line has not been adjusted in several years. We use this line almost every year. You can see there's been some years that maybe it wasn't used, and that's because there either wasn't an entry-level test that we provided or a promotional test that we provided. But this is a service that we provide. We contract out to a vendor, which is in our best interest to do so, the town's best interest to do so, to provide entry-level and promotional interviews in terms of devising the questions, sending out representatives to oversee the process. This really limits our liability and keeps it a fair and honest process. And so that line has to be increased because it has not been increased in some time. And when we do run tests, we're finding that we're just about overspending it. EMT training is another line that we're looking to increase. This is a pretty significant increase of $52,000. This is in large part because we're unable to attract paramedic firefighters. So in other words, we're unable to attract a number of firefighters that are interested in being paramedics, or are already paramedic, I should say. And so we need to start looking at the possibility of sending them to paramedic school. And so to do that, the tuition cost for paramedic school is quite extensive. It's at least what I've asked for, and that's going to cover some of the personnel costs as well associated with sending them to school. So this covers both tuition, and it also is going to cover the expense to have them sit in the class. Now, we're fortunate that some of the paramedic classes have started to go hybrid. And so we've seen that as a product of COVID, where courses now are kind of this blended learning concept, where you're learning some things online, you're learning some things in the classroom. And so with that now in the last year, this makes it somewhat attainable for us to consider sending firefighters to paramedic school, doing a portion of their studies while they're at home or at work, and then spending a day in class every week for about a year on top of their clinical times and so forth. But we have two issues. We need to attract paramedics, and we need to retain the paramedics that we have. All the paramedics that we have, for the most part, need to maintain a 12-year commitment as a paramedic to the town. If I look at that clock and I look at what's happening, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, I can see that clock expiring, and we're pushing up against a point where we may not have enough paramedics in a few years to necessarily continue with the operations that we intend to have. And so this line supports not only the attraction of more firefighter EMTs that might have an interest in going to paramedic school that we can send, but also making sure that we can maintain operations moving forward.
Chief, I have a quick question about that. In your narrative, you're saying the tuition cost is $11,000 each, and then in the next sentence, it says the cost will cover tuition for 2.
Correct.
So which is it?
So I'm looking to send 2 firefighters, and so this line covers the tuition and some of the hourly expenses of having to send them.
So 2 times 11,000 is
Correct.
22,000. And you're saying there's an additional 30,000 that covers contractual replacement staffing, or what?
No, so that wouldn't come out of contractual replacement staffing. That's just needing to pay them to attend the hundreds of hours of clinical time. So their rotation in the ED, their rotation in the OR, their rotation in a trauma floor, all that time that they have to spend. You can't learn to paramedic completely online. There's still a lot of clinical rotations you have to do, and so that's what that covers.
So they would not be taken out of circulation from their normal shift duties. This would be during their 3 days off.
Correct.
And so the additional $30,000 would be covering what costs?
Them attending clinical rotations.
So you're paying for their clinical time, or?
Correct.
I see.
Yep, I have to. Yeah. There's hundreds of hours they have to go to and spend in the hospital responding to incidents on ambulances in order to basically practice the training that they're getting over the course of a year. And so to do that, I need to pay them for their time.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so you're paying for the tuition and paying for their time. Got it. Okay.
And
thank
so,
you for
Chief,
explaining.
what's happened with the department historically when we've hired a paramedic? Have they come already fully licensed?
Yeah, in many cases they did. But what's changed is there's significant stipends that are provided to paramedics and other departments. And other departments are able to attract them, whereas North Haven necessarily is not able to.
Thank you.
Training at $30,000, so this is fire training specifically, and so if we're looking to hire additional firefighters, this is direct correlation to the tuition to attend the 14-week fire academy.
So out of the firefighters that we have, how many are paramedics?
Probably in the neighborhood of 14. Again, that can change from year to year
Yeah,
because moving on, contractual replacement staffing, looking for a $60,000 increase there. There's 2 driving factors for this, a wage increase, contractual wage increase, and there's an increase in sick time that we're trending as well. And so that's a number that we've talked about before. I realize it's breaking the $1 million point at this point in the budget. It absolutely is. But if you look at even where we're spent right now, this fiscal year, this anticipates and budgets for the contractual replacement time, the vacation, the sick leave, the funeral leave, the jury leave, the military leave, the leave of individuals who are hurt and we need to cover their shifts with overtime for months at a time. That's what that line covers. The overtime increase of $1,800 is reflective simply of a wage increase in trying to keep up with that.
Just a quick question regarding the contractual replacement staffing. Do you have any evidence, at least for 50% of the time that we have 11 people per shift, that there has been a financial benefit to that in terms of contractual replacement staffing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can see it every day. Every day that those two, I shouldn't say that every day, 2 of the days that we have 11 firefighters on duty, if there's one out, we can see it. I mean, we didn't pay overtime if there's one person out that shift.
Right, so it's 2 of the 4 shifts, however that translates in a given
Sure.
week. It might be 2 days, it might be 3 days, but,
We've built in $90,000 in savings for each of those 2 shifts. And so if that wasn't the case, this line would be $180,000 plus a $60,000.
right, so that's the kind of data that we would love to be able to see. And obviously, you can't do it for all shifts, because you don't have all shifts. But it would be encouraging for all of us to be able to actually see that data. I know in previous years, you've put up some hypothetical data and tried to project based on that, but it would be really good to have concrete data.
Sure.
Thank you.
Moving on with operational budget line increases, there's a $45,000 increase in the EMT line. This is specific to a contractual stipend increase that was negotiated this last contract. And then building maintenance and repair at $50,000. This is entirely to cover snow removal, sanding, and lawn care at 3 of the 4 stations. And so this expense was previously funded through the central facilities line, and it's been asked to be transferred over into the fire department budget line. I'm not very confident in the $50,000 because I'll give you an example. The storm that came through on January 7th and 8th was a $6,000 bill for the 3 stations for sanding and plowing. And so when you look at a winter that we could get a lot of ice storms, a lot of snowstorms, this may exceed $50,000 in expenses. And the fixed amount on the lawn care is about $7,000 to $8,000 a year. So we know right away that that's, fortunately grass grows pretty consistently, right? It's the sanding and plowing that I'm concerned with. And so we looked at the last 2 years. We've had 2 years of pretty light snow and ice, but $50,000 seems like that's what's going to get us started, and we'll keep an eye on it moving forward, but we have to sand and plow the stations. That's not an option.
The Department of Public Works doesn't maintain our own building sites?
We do the paid fire department.
Oh, this is volunteer.
Yeah, I'm not.
Even still.
Yeah, still. I mean, they still have a duty to respond, paid or volunteer.
No, I understand. I'm just
Yeah.
curious why we're not maintaining our own building.
Right.
That's what I was,
Right.
that was my question.
We're going to subcontract that out, or we're going to pay our own people?
Sounds like it was subcontract, that was just paid for in a different line, right?
Correct. It's been subbed out, so is a competitive bid process that we're part of, and we tack it on to the cemetery plowing, and it's a contracted award. It's been like this now for a number of years. It's just been funded through the central facilities line.
And it sounds like the 3 volunteer houses were previously maintained by the Department of Public Works. And
I
that's-
don't know when that ever occurred. No, that hasn't been like that while I've been chief. It's always, well, I shouldn't say that. It's probably been 6 or 7 years. I believe the first year or 2 Public Works was doing it, and then it went to a private contractor.
So this is what your narrative says, is lawn care services, sanding and plowing at 3 of the 4 fire stations are not maintained by local DPW and require fire department to contract for services with vendor through competitive bid process. This line increase is the result of a change in practice at the request of the Director of Administration and Procurement. Previously, this expense was funded through the central supplies because it is a service that should be maintained by the DPW. Snow removal services and sanding costs over the last 2 years were about $51,000.
Correct.
And lawn care services about $4,000 and $5,000. I'm struggling to actually envision the patch of lawn that would require $5,000.
Yeah, it's, there's some grass at all 3 stations.
Uh-huh.
Not a lot, but still enough. And it's 2 cleanups, right? And so I made sure that when the bid went out, that there's 2 cleanups, you know, somebody has to go around and remove branches and so forth. I mean, these are town buildings. We want them looking presentable, we want them looking nice. And, you know, that's part of what that is as well.
Right. But these are also town-owned buildings, even though they're volunteer firehouses, these are town-owned buildings, so I'm still
correct, yeah.
trying to understand why this isn't covered, but, okay.
That's what I have for operations. The operations lines should all have been covered at this point, and I can start to get into some capital unless there's any further questions on the operation lines.
You're going to get into personnel later?
I am.
Okay.
I figure that's the lengthier topic, so we'll save that to last.
Good idea. Let's do the capital.
All right, so capital. I've highlighted what should be reflected in your 5-year capital plan, and specifically what's being asked for this year, but we can go through them each individually. So you'll see in there, I've requested the administrative vehicles. I've increased it from 1 to 2. It seems like it does get cut every single year. I don't know why. I don't know how to impress upon this board the need that we cannot respond with a fire engine to every single thing that we need to respond with. There's other vehicles. I would think this board would want us to use more efficient, economical vehicles to respond to incidents. And so it's been cut every year. We need administrative vehicles for chief officers, for individuals in our fire marshal's office to go out, respond to incidents, conduct inspections, conduct investigations, conduct some PR at times, respond to mutual aid to other incidents that are in different towns. It seems like it gets cut every single year. And so we need to start looking at a ongoing process of replacing 1 to 2 administrative vehicles every single year.
And how many do we have, Paul?
Thank you.
So I have that at the end, and I can show it to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I know that was requested prior to this meeting. Extrication equipment, this was also requested last year, and it was cut. The last time that we replaced extrication equipment through capital was 2016, 2017. We have multiple sets of extrication equipment within our fleet because we can never necessarily know which apparatus will be responding to an incident that requires this equipment. And so we have multiple sets. Some of the sets that we have are outdated to the point that if they were to break, we cannot repair it. Some of them are outdated to the point where with the modern vehicles on the road today, we cannot cut into them and get you out. And so this is the kind of thing where we need to stay on top of, we need to replace it. It gets better and better. Think of it almost as a computer. Every year it gets a little bit better. And so every year this equipment gets a little bit stronger to keep up with the cars that we have on the roads today. We need to start looking at replacing extrication equipment.
I have a question. So the accidents that you respond to, and I see this a lot when I'm on the highway, that from Hamden to merging on right before Montauk, I see you guys over there all the time. That's a sore spot. There's a lot of accidents in that area, and you guys are always there, and it's always motor vehicle accidents or I actually think that the state or somebody needs to look at that, because that, when you're merging, that merge is really long, and I think people think it's a lane, and then boom.
You referred to the 63 South on-ramp?
Yeah, that's the, I don't know what you call, it's the one from, it's
Bishop
like the
Street
connector.
almost, Bishop
No, the connector, 91 from 91.
Okay.
It's that connector. Well, now the exits are marked A, B, and I'm
Right,
like,
right.
what the heck, that doesn't mean anything, but it's that merge. As that's a long merge, and every time I go that way, I see fire department over there for something, because it's so long of a, merge that I think people thinks it's a lane, and then right there's a lot of accidents. And that's what made me think of this, because I see you guys pulling people out of.
So you're not only seeing one apparatus, you're seeing 2
Yeah.
and 3.
Yeah, because somebody has to block, and right, exactly, but,
So when you think about that, and you think about how many apparatus we have on staff per shift, so if we have 3 of them at that particular scene, you only have 2 more in town to respond. And this extrication equipment is necessary in order to open doors or cut,
Get people out.
whatever it might be, to get persons out of those crashed up vehicles. So, and those of us that went through the training have had hands-on, and we recognize how heavy and how strong they are and many of them are hydraulic, and they begin to lose that power in order to open up those hinges and whatever it needs to be. So obviously, this is an important tool that needs to be carried on each one of our apparatus.
Yeah, that's a bad spot. I think somebody needs to look at how that,
Yeah, that's a state situation.
I know, that is a state situation, but they needs to look at that. The state needs to look at that, because it's constant. It's constant.
We're on the highway a lot.
Yeah, but that area, because I go through that area a lot, and it's like every time I go through there, I see the fire department.
So Chief, all of the items that you see pictured there, those are all hydraulic, correct?
Those are all hydraulic,
Those are
yeah.
all
So
hydraulic.
we've gone over to some hydraulic as well, which are battery operated.
Yes.
But we have to have a small contingent of hydraulic as well, because if you do get an incident that is a prolonged incident, I mean, I hate to say this, but sometimes some of these vehicles, it can take us 45 minutes to an hour to manipulate our way into the vehicle and get you out, tractor trailer, for example, or whatever. And so we do have hydraulic equipment because you can use it indefinitely.
Right.
Whereas a battery, you can't, right? And so, yeah, we've switched over to what we call hydraulic or battery operated, but still, they still have a limitation to them.
Right. And the total number that you have of both
We have
types?
about 4 complete sets at any given time. Now, I say complete sets. There might be a vehicle that we throw one small piece on. So you can see in the middle is what we call the spreaders, right? Otherwise known as the jaws of life. And so we might have a small set on a rescue truck to just kind of get started until an engine gets there or a truck gets there with a heavier set on it. And so we have about 4 complete sets. We have some bits and pieces in different places to kind of get us started while we're waiting for apparatus.
And again, the division between hydraulic and battery operated, and your proposal is to purchase which kind?
It depends on if it gets approved or not. So we can
Right.
look at it and
But
see how
in your
old
wish
everything
list.
is. Yeah, we got to see how old things are. And what I always look at is they get serviced every year. And so we have to look at the most recent service record, see what was written up, see, for example, the blades on the very bottom. Sometimes if you go to cut into metal and the metal is too strong for that cutter, it actually starts to warp the blades. Well, we don't know that when we start to cut. That's why you always just want to have the best of the best, so you don't have to worry about damaging your equipment. And so we can look at it and see what the most recent maintenance records were and see what needs to be replaced. At this point, I don't know.
And again, as I recall, there was at least one functioning hydraulic, and you had 3 battery packs. Is
Sounds
that
about
what you
right.
mean by the 4?
Correct.
Okay. And your proposal for this particular $30,000 budget line item, you're thinking of going with the best of the best, which falls into which category?
Most
Battery?
likely the hydraulic, the battery operated.
Battery operated, okay. Which might not be as strong, and certainly wouldn't be able to last as long as the hydraulic.
Not necessarily, no. No, because the
Which is
batteries
what
you
you
can
just said.
replace.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
Chief, how many sets does the 30,000 represent?
1 set.
Okay,
one set. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
You'll see in here a $300,000 request for capital for PPE. It's a big number, and this is a number that a lot of communities right now in the state are looking at and having to contend with. What this is, Chairman, if you wouldn't mind sending this karate mat. So there's been a lot of movement within the state of Connecticut and throughout the country to look to prevent cancer, minimize the presence of cancer in firefighters.
Good to see you, sir.
It's pretty well known that if you're a firefighter, unfortunately, your likelihood of contracting cancer is quite high. And so there's been a lot of efforts to try to minimize the presence of cancer in the fire service, and a lot of research and science that's gone into looking at the ways that we're contaminating ourselves and the ways that we can prevent trying to keep cancer down in the fire service. And so one of those has been looking at the PPE that we wear, the equipment that you see pictured there. So our gloves, our boots, our hood, the jacket, the pants. When you actually put those these firefighters in environments with, like, let's say dyed smoke, where you can then take a black light afterwards and see where did the smoke penetrate, you're able to see traces of that dye in different places in firefighters, and that's exactly where we're absorbing these toxins that are leading to cancer. And so there's been a state model document that's been pushed out at the result of a public act, which you see listed there, 22-139, in which the minimum guidance, the minimum foundation for each department is that we should be putting every firefighter, doesn't matter if you're volunteer or career, every firefighter, we should have 2 sets, complete sets of PPE. And so that's 2 of everything you see pictured. 2 helmets, 2 gloves, 2 jackets, pants, boots, everything. That's quite costly. We currently don't have that set up. We have that set up for some of the career staff, but we don't have complete sets. And so the guidance that came out was not only, a second set of pants and jacket, which we have for some of our staff, but it's everything else. And so that's what the guidance is showing. And to do that, it's a $300,000 expense. And so I've been asked already, well, can we implement it? Can we look at it over time? That's a decision I'll leave for this board. What I will tell you is a firefighter coming on duty right now at 8 a.m. is on duty until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. If he or she comes across any fire whatsoever, dumpster, car, house, whatever, he or she should be taking that entire set of PPE and putting it into the laundry and dryer and getting it completely clean, scrubbing it, cleaning it, and this is what they do. However, they don't have a complete second set to go into. They can't do that until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning when they come off duty. So now what we're asking firefighters to do is for the next rest of their shift to keep putting on that gear, that PPE that has toxins on it, keep exposing themselves to contaminants that could eventually lead to cancer. And so having a full second set of PPE allows them to transition right away into a second set and start working on cleaning their first set.
Is it shared amongst firefighters?
It is not, sir. It's a good question, but PPE is specific to firefighters individually. And the reason for that is, think about if you and I don't wear the same size suit. Look like we're pretty close. But if we were to put a suit jacket on and put our arms up, right, our sleeves might come up to here. And so I can't put firefighters in the same jackets and pants. Yeah, unfortunately. So this is what the guidance is showing. This is pretty passionate for the firefighters right now. They are watching this. I think it's also a detriment to recruitment right now to firefighters in the industry in general, not just to North Haven, obviously, but to the entire industry, because we all know that cancer is prevalent right now. And so we are taking a pretty hard stance right now. We're doing other things as well. Yeah, we're cleaning down the apparatus. Think about all the touch points that you have when you wear contaminants, right? So you're putting something on, you're wearing it back to the station. Well, everything you just touched inadvertently now has to be cleaned as well. And so we're taking steps like that on a weekly basis to really go in and almost what we would know as white glove clean things to make sure that the toxins are removed and they're off. This is a pretty big request, but it's pretty important to the firefighters.
So Chief, what fraction of the firefighters currently have 2 sets?
Complete sets of
Yes.
everything? None. Because we haven't purchased second helmets, second boots necessarily. We haven't purchased all of that for every firefighter because we've done a pretty good job of staying on top of the jackets and the pants for a lot of them, not all of them. Some of our volunteers, we were providing a second set of turnout gear, PPE, for our more active volunteers. The guidance doesn't say how active you are. The guidance now says every firefighter.
And so the idea would be to start from scratch and everybody gets a second full set, or, fill in the blanks?
This number represents providing a second set for every member. And even if you have a partially second set, let's say that you have a second jacket and pants, but not necessarily a helmet and boots, this number represents that.
Right.
And I just have to say that phasing in, the idea of not doing it all at once, I don't know how you make the decision of which firefighter you're going to give the protection to and which one you're going to hold back. Is it a lottery? How do we decide? So I think it's something to really think about. This is about protecting their health and safety. So as a commissioner, that would be a concern on how we would be left to decide who gets the second set and who doesn't.
And this 300's all the full-time, but also all the volunteers?
That's correct, yeah, it's everybody.
There's been a lengthy discussion on our commission regarding the safety of our firefighters, and this is a very important initiative that we are all in agreement with. We need to make sure that we are able to prevent cancer in our firefighters as best we can. And by having 2 sets of turnout gear, we're thinking that we will be able to adhere to the state law and certainly protect our firefighters. So that is a request that is very important to this commission.
Not to diminish the importance of what everyone just said, but is it law or guidance?
It's guidance right now.
Okay, thank you.
2 other things that are worth noting as well is one, we're self-insured, right? And so if we can prevent a cancer medical claim at some point in the future, I think that means something, particularly to this board. And then it's also just worth noting that we need to also provide second sets for every new firefighter that we bring on as well.
How long does it take to clean an outfit?
So it's a good question. So we only have 2 washer and dryers right now for PPE. And you cannot take 10 sets of gear and put it in there. It's too much. So we can only wash about 2 to 3 sets depending on what we're talking about. And the wash takes, about an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's a pretty aggressive wash cycle where it really, makes sure that the material is clean. And then the drying is what takes a long time as well. So the drying can take hours. And so you're really looking at a 4 to a 5 hour process at a minimum to be able to get this clean.
For 1 set?
For 1 set. And then if we need to wash 10 sets of PPE, that's an all-day affair.
Now, do other departments our size have 2 sets of machines?
I don't know.
Okay.
That might be the-
And how often do you believe they're exposed to these toxins? I mean, is it only during a structure fire of commercial property?
No, so every fire, car fire,
Yeah.
the batteries, lithium-ion batteries right now, dumpster fires. Dumpster fires, we kind of look at as kind of mundane, but we don't know what's burning inside. So it could be almost any fire, with the exception maybe of brush. But even then, these firefighters, why take a chance? Even if it's Class A materials and sticks and wood, they're going to look to clean their PPE.
Where are these washing machines?
So I have 1 at headquarters and 1 at West Ridge.
So someone else in another, like Mondelez, would have to come,
Correct.
have to bring their stuff and do that, okay.
Yep, and so we bag it, we treat it almost like it's a biohazard. And, the members that are doing the cleaning, put on PPE themselves. But you're seeing this change quite a bit right now in the fire service everywhere.
Chief, just a quick, refresh my memory, back a few years ago when there was that awful fire at Defco Park, in which many of the firefighters were exposed to God knows what. It seems to me at that time that you replaced all of the turnout gear, and a lot of that was funded by the insurance as well as the
Correct.
insurance both from the town and from the private organization where the fire was. Was there a second set at that time?
Sure, and some of the members, they had second sets, right.
So
We
at
had to
that
borrow
time-
second sets, is my recollection. You got some second sets from other departments, my
We did,
recollection.
yeah, we had to, because
Yeah.
think about even what we did a few years ago here was we increased the equipment line to cover fire hoses and the replacement of about 7 to 8 sets of PPE on an annual basis. That line was cut 2 years ago, and so we've struggled to keep up with providing a primary set of PPE for our firefighters, because the other thing to keep in mind too is this equipment is only good for 10 years. So every set of structural firefighter gear that we put our members in, it's a 10-year shelf life, used or not.
Got it.
Okay, why don't we move on to the next item?
We've done this in the past in terms of CCTV and security and so forth. Every year for 4 years, we put $20,000 aside to put cameras in each of our stations, and that's worked out really well. We've actually deterred some crime. We've caught some things as well, and it's worked out really well. We put badge readers and proximity readers, access control in all of our stations. We're looking to do the same thing now with the training center. CCTV would still be installed as a deterrence, but we need to work on some fencing. That property that sits behind the Northeast Fire Station, which is across from Big Y, is wide open on 2 sides. On the side that faces Washington Avenue and on the north side, there is no fencing at all. And so as we start to do more training back there and we start to really use that property, we need to make sure that it's secure from not only trespassers, but from any potential thieves as well. We've had things stolen right out of the back of cars, and our CERT bus had the catalytic converter cut out of Monteluise a couple years ago, if you remember. And so it does happen. We are targeted for crime at times. We need to do some security preventive measures at that site if we want to continue to use it and have any confidence that we're going to have stuff left there when we get back. SCBA's. So this is what we wear on our backs going to all these incidents that we just talked about, as well as some others. The last time that we purchased any SCBA's was 2015, 2016. So there's been no request for SCBA's since that time. They have roughly a 10-year shelf life to them. Not so much the bottles, but the units themselves, and there's some variability in that number because it depends on how much they're used. We're looking at about 10 to 12 years, depending on the apparatus they're assigned to, of shelf life for these SCBA's. We need to start looking at replacing 8 of them or so a year to stay ahead of this. Otherwise, we're looking at a huge increase for purchase 60-plus SCBA's in a few years. If we can start to do this a little bit at a time, that'll help us tremendously moving forward into the future. One thing to keep in mind is that when we purchased about 50 SCBA's in 2015-16, we structured it so that it was a financed purchase, and we saved tens of thousands of dollars that time. You can go back and see what that number was. I reported on it. At that time, though, we had a number of our older version of SCBA's that we were able to retain. Let's say there were a dozen of them. Out of those dozen, we were able to use those for training. Training environments are where these things really take a beating. They're knocked around, they're put in environments that not only put stress on a firefighter in terms of training, but also stress our equipment as well. We were able to use 10 to 12 of these in a training scenarios for a couple of years. Unfortunately, those all now have become 20 plus years old, and so they're not usable anymore. And so now what we're finding ourselves doing is in training scenarios, using our primary SCBA's in order to use them for training. And so we're drawing upon that lifespan of our SCBA's even more, unless we can purchase some to start to filter into training and start to try to make this more of a gradual replacement.
So Chief, the lease on the SCBA's went through 2021?
Sounds about right, is when it finished up, yeah.
And so was that the exact same items, or are they new items?
Those are the same
So it's
items.
the same items, you're just leasing
Yeah,
it
so
over a period of
I
time?
think it was probably a 5-year purchase that we did, so that makes sense. 15, 16, every year for 5 years. I think it was $80,000.
Yep, just
that
about.
we paid. And so, but they all were provided to us in 2015, 16, and so they all are that old right now.
And as part of the lease, are they refurbished or somehow
It's not a
serviced
lease.
each year?
It was financing, essentially. We
Right.
financed the purchase.
But there's no annual service associated with the leasing, or there is?
Associated with the leasing, no, there's annual service that we do on these anyways to make sure that they're certified to
Right,
be used.
that's my main
But
concern.
that's a separate line. We
Okay.
take that out of the equipment line.
Got it.
Nancy, they're generally municipal leases with a dollar buyout. They're really loans.
Yeah.
It's just what they happen to call them.
Okay.
Right, yeah, he would call them leases. The second floor of the Northeast Station is pictured on your screen. This is how this station has appeared since 2013. So we have been unable to accommodate any volunteers in terms of social setting, standbys when they have to stand by for storms and trying to cook a meal or trying to get any kind of rest and relaxation in, as we're calling them, from their homes. Now if we look to ever start putting career staff in that station, we're not able to do so until we finish the second floor of that station. This is how it appears. We have a lot of work to do. We need to, there's the skeleton of the station is there, the second floor. So the bones are there, but we've got to install kitchen, living quarters, female accommodations as well. So, bunk room and bathrooms. Report rooms, we need to look at technology, so some computers need to go in there. We need to be able to put in lighting systems. And what I mean by lighting systems is when there's an incident that takes place and that station is notified, there's alerts that take place, and there's lights that come on to alert the firefighters that their station needs to assemble a response. There's radios that need to be installed throughout the station so that they can monitor what's taking place in town. That right now has none of that in that station. And so that $250,000 covers all of the remodeling that needs to take place at that station to accommodate the existing volunteers and the future career staff.
So Chief, I know she had a lot of invoices and quotes and stuff for everything here. Was that in here, or, I mean, not that, did you actually quote that?
Yeah, so I have quotes for some of it, but not all of it,
right.
because some of the technology, it's kind of hard to get into until you really start
Right.
getting in there. So I'd expect it to take $250 with
Okay.
technology and everything.
Thank you.
Hydrants, we've done a great job utilizing that site for training. There's a lot of businesses that have provided donations. There's a lot of individuals who have provided donations to make that site what it is today. Quinnipiac provided a couple $100,000 to help build a tower. The town's really put very little money into this site. The one thing that we have to put into this site is hydrants. We've got to bring hydrants into the rear of that station because we can't do a lot back there right now that we intend to do. So right now, there are no hydrants in the rear of that station that we can tap into and utilize for training. There's a requirement for us to do any kind of fire scenarios, and we're not going to do a lot of fire scenarios back there, but we're going to do some at some point in time, and legally we need to have a static water supply in place in order to do that. And so even right now, any kind of the water training that we're going to do, you know, different streams, different nozzles, and so forth, looking at pump capacity, looking at GPM, you know, how much we can get out of the nozzles. You know, there's math that goes into every time that we flow water in hoses. You know, how much hose can you flow? How much water can you flow out of an engine and before you lose pressure? And so there's a lot of training that's taking place on a regular basis. We're limited in our capacity right now to do much of that because most of your engines are carrying 750 to 1,000 gallons of water. And that's what we have to train with. Beyond that, the engine's out of water, the engine's out of service. The engine can't now respond to any fires because it's out of water. And so now we have to take the engine, go down the street, find a hydrant, and fill off a hydrant. That disrupts the public water supply. That's when water starts turning brown. Unfortunately, that's what happens right now. And so by putting a couple of hydrants there, it allows us to use those hydrants regularly, not disrupt the public water supply as much. Unfortunately, this cost has gone up substantially. I had a quote for this at $70,000 in 2017-18. It's grown to $170,000. So it's something that we've seen increase over time. And so it's something that we need to look to address so that we can utilize that property and that training center as it's intended.
And Chief, where's the next closest hydrant to this facility?
So when they were working on Route 5, probably 5 years ago, so it was after 17-18, I had a conversation with the water company, and they agreed to bring the water under Route 5. And so it's not even the closest hydrant. There is a gate box that sits right now at the corner of that property that they've already brought under Route 5, ready to be tapped into for hydrants. Just a matter of extending that right through. The closest hydrant that we can get to easily without disrupting traffic is Temple Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's $170,000 just to take it from that box back?
Yeah,
Just
and
piping,
I have
basically?
the quotes from then previously to what it is now. It's an exorbitant amount. It's the trenching, it's the water line itself, under the frost line, it's 2 hydrants, it's a lot.
Got it.
So one thing I didn't start off with, that I kind of saved into this point as we started getting into the next part of the presentation, is our responses. Our responses haven't changed all that much from last year. Last year in 2023, we did 4,866 separate alarms. What you sometimes see reported if you look at other departments or news or social media is what they call runs. So it's how many times apparatus went on a response. That would be 8,685 different runs. So that's 8,685 times our apparatus were dispatched. Because one alarm may require 1 unit, or it may require several units. And so that's where that run number derives from. It comes out to about 24 runs a day, 24 responses a day. Unlike a lot of other departments, we are not a 70% EMS department. with the way that we've structured the EMS response in our town with Nelson Ambulance and having direct communication back to our PSAP, to our 911 center, we were able to cut a lot of the medical calls that our department was responding to out and send just an ambulance, like I covered a short time ago. And so we're not a 70% heavy EMS department. We're about 52% EMS. 42% fire-related, 6% is accidents. Of those, we're on the highway over 225 times a year. Now think about the highway responses for a moment. I heard it referenced a few minutes ago. Every highway response takes multiple apparatus to respond to in order to make it safe. We need to be able to treat the individuals that are on scene and position apparatus for immediate treatment. Sometimes we need to position apparatus to be able to start cutting somebody out of a vehicle. Sometimes we need to be able to set vehicles up to put auto fires out and car fires out. And so we need to have a number of apparatus there to fulfill all those functions in real time as we're finding that it's happening, and on top of that, make the scene safe. Set up apparatus in a situation where we can make sure that there's a traffic flow taking place that puts the individuals involved in the accident and all the first responders safe. And so it takes multiple apparatus to respond to the highway and to set these scenes up in a safe manner. And there are multiple times that we have multiple accidents on the highway. Think about a bad winter snowstorm, how many accidents you see occurring on the highway. We have a very, very hard time managing the response to highway responses when we have multiple accidents taking place, because we only have so many apparatus. We only go so deep.
If you recall, last year, we had an apparatus struck on the highway. It was a year before we had that apparatus back in service, a year. So when you think about taking out one of our major pieces of apparatus as a result of an automobile accident, now you're backfilling with maybe a 30-year-old engine. It just doesn't make any sense. So it's a difficult task at best, and certainly in order to protect our firefighters, it's a necessary task.
Chief, quick question. When you say approximately 52% of calls are EMS, that is excluding the ones that Nelson responds to, or it includes it?
Excluding.
So it excludes it. So I would love it if you could present the overall profile of the total 911 calls that require some response as the first step. And then the second step is to show the demand of your department.
So we do that with the fire commission on a regular basis.
That would be great
Fully
if you
aware
could
of it.
share that data with us as well.
I'm not
Because
sure
I think that it's important to understand the overall demand for our community first, and then the demand placed on the fire department second.
Well, and I think this presentation is about the budget and the resources that the fire department are putting out, so that's why you're getting the 52%, because the benefit of Nelson, having the Nelson contract, is it doesn't then add to the demands of the fire department in terms of, staffing and other things.
Yeah,
So,
I'm just saying, one without the other, I think, presents a skewed perspective on what the needs of our community are. Now, it's being met by a combination of the fire department and Nelson, absolutely, but I think you have to present both sets of data. That's all.
That data is presented to the Board of Fire Commissioners, who are elected to receive the information from the chief. So the 5 commissioners that on a monthly basis understand and receive this information and continue to talk about it and really are able to present to the public during our meetings at North Haven Public TV what is actually taking place. For instance, when the chief talks about the call volume in general being at 70% versus 52% where our EMS calls are coming in, with Nelson Ambulance taking it on the rest, and having digressed from some of the calls that we were taking previously, whether they be alcohol related or whatever it might be. Our commission is thoroughly aware of that. So I think, as Jenny clearly indicated, we understand it. It's presented to your committee as far as financing what our needs are, and I'm hopeful that if you're asking for all of this information, what purpose would it be for us to be fire commissioners? I mean, here we are, we're doing the month-to-month, day-to-day informational, taking the information from the chief and the deputy chiefs. So, you know, why would we have a purpose then? If you're looking for all of this particular information.
It's simply context,
Okay,
just
if I
as I
could-
would
if-
ask of
if
the
I
Board of
could-
Education
If I
or
could,
any
if I
other
could
board.
interrupt, please.
Yeah.
I happen to agree with the two commissioners. Not that we don't, the public doesn't deserve a holistic view of what the fire department does, but that sounds like it's being achieved at their monthly meetings.
It absolutely is.
So we have asked the chief for some additional information on other topics, which he has brought to the meeting. I'm satisfied with the information, at least on this screen, that we've had so far.
Thank you.
It's worth noting a couple other things regarding incident response, and that is that 40% of the time, we have multiple incidents occurring. And so as we start to get into the next couple of slides, I just want you to visualize multiple incidents taking place at the same time and the need for simultaneous responses. It's worth also noting that in 2021, we once again worked to try to cut back on the total number of alarms that you see pictured there. So we took out emergent responses to medical facilities. That happened gradually. It was probably finalized in 2021, and that's for a variety of operational reasons. But again, with Nelson Ambulance able to respond to these locations, there has to be specific life or death occurrences occurring within these healthcare facilities in order to necessitate a fire response. So acute respiratory distress, acute chest pain, CPR, those types of things, where the more help that responds, the better. The routine, what I'm going to say routine, and they're not always routine, but the less severe incidents taking place at these medical facilities, which we have a lot of them. We have several. We do not no longer have to respond to. Pump outs. The pump outs was a service that our volunteers provided to the community for a long time, for decades. And about 2021, we are looking at our volunteers and we're looking at their response. So these last couple of rainstorms that we had, this would have drawn 20 incidents a day, going to sometimes the same houses that were responding to the last rainstorm or last year. And so our volunteers were providing this level of service to the community, and they were getting beat up. And I will tell you the conversation I had with one of the volunteers one day. He says, "Chief, I just got done doing pump outs all day. If we get a fire tonight, I can't come." And I said, "Geez, well, which one's more important? The fire is more important." And so we cut out the pump outs at about 2021. And so now and unfortunately that impacts our citizens, right? I totally get it. But now if you're a citizen and you call our 911 center to have your basement pumped out, we've instructed our 911 center to provide a list of companies that provide that service. It's at a cost, unfortunately, but we were going around dropping pumps off, picking them up a few hours later, and it was pretty labor intensive. So that cut out a lot of calls. So what changed during 2023? And unfortunately, a lot has changed. We were blessed and fortunate to have 3 volunteer stations in this town that assembled a response for decades. Unfortunately, January 29th, 2023, what was left of the Montauk East volunteers electively decided to resign. The impact of what happened on December 26, 2022 played a big role in their emotions and in their decision to no longer provide volunteer service to the Montauk East section of town. And so, did we have a career engine staff there? Yes. However, they are still responsible for getting out one other engine in that section of town, and then anywhere else in town as it was needed. So they electively decided to resign from the department. At that time, there were about 6 to 7 volunteers left, and some went to another station, and then some just quit volunteering altogether. That played an impact. That had a big role in our ability to respond and how deep we can go with responses in the community. Keep in mind that what happened was their incident response, so the incidents that station was assigned to respond to, even with career staff there, need to be shifted elsewhere. And so Montauk East was covering about 278 incidents, the volunteers. When that company shut down, those 278 calls needed to be made up somewhere else. And so when you look at geographically which station, volunteer station, can continue to get to the Montauk East side of town, and you look at some other factors, most of these calls shifted to West Ridge. And so the 278 incidents that Monte Luisa responded to in 2022 shifted over into West Ridge. And so that station now has taken on a lot of that call volume. Keep in mind what we ask our volunteers to respond to. They're no longer responding to residential fire alarms. They're responding to commercial fire alarms because of the size of the building and how long it takes to go through these buildings sometimes and identify if there's hazards present. And they're responding to all the fires. So the car fires, the brush fires, the house fires, the dumpster fires, and so forth, where we need either more water on scene, we need more help on scene, we need help cutting the car open, or whatever it might be. Those are the incidents that the volunteers are responding to. And then if we are all tied up, all the career staff are tied up, we do dispatch the volunteers. Not to medical calls, but to every other incident. What I'm concerned with is we shifted a lot of those incidents onto West Ridge. They went from 314 incidents in 2022 to 440 last year, 2023. That's a big increase. We ask our volunteers to respond to 25% of the incidents that they're dispatched to. We need to have some ability to know that they're going to assemble a response. 25% is a number that's been adhered to for a long, long time. So that increase was pretty substantial. What I'm looking at now is Northeast. Unfortunately, Northeast is down to 6 volunteers. In 2024, I expect that number to drop to 4. We're going to likely lose one member to becoming a career member, and we're going to likely lose another member because he's going to age out at 66 years old, and he's one of the most active volunteers we have left in town. I've seen this happen at Monte Luisa. And so what I'm concerned with is we have, right now, present day, 6 volunteers left at Northeast. That station has an engine and a ladder truck assigned to it. And even with 6 volunteers, assuming they're all available, they can't get out an engine and a truck. So we're at this point right now where if I look to do anything with Northeast, where am I shifting those calls to? The only station I can shift them to is West Ridge. West Ridge is pretty healthy. They're doing okay. I'll show you what they have for numbers in a moment. But I'm very concerned about what's happening with the volunteers in this community and how reliant upon the volunteers we are. West Ridge has 14 volunteers within their station right now, and they're responsible for responding with 2 engines. They have 3 probationary members, meaning that they have 3 members that are in training, that are in the works. We don't know if all 3 will pass, will decide to stay with it. We don't know that. Northeast is at 6 and with 1 probationary. So that puts our present day roster for volunteers at 24, 20 of which are qualified, out of what used to be 105 volunteers in this town. I report to this board every single year that I've been chief, where we stand with volunteers. I have that here if you'd like to see it, that I can pass out, so that we can see that trend continuing to go down. We continue to work with the Explorer program. We continue to work with bringing on high school students into the fire service and introducing them to the fire service. That program's going pretty well. What we're seeing happen with a lot of those is they're being hired right away to career departments. They're going off to college. You know, this is something that we're introducing them to the idea of firefighting, but we're not seeing a ton of retention out of it. Nonetheless, it's a good community service that we're providing. But we are continuing to try to attract new volunteers. For years, we've had signs up in front of the stations looking to bring on volunteers. We've advertised in social media. We've done commercials. We participated in statewide open houses. The volunteers came up with an idea a couple of years ago where they teamed up with a lot of the restaurants in town that were doing takeout, and they were attaching volunteer wanted fire flyers to all the takeout that people were ordering in town. There's no shortage of knowledge that we need volunteers. My sons and I went around and we hung up volunteer wanted signs at most of the entrances into town. I have pictures of my sons and I putting up signs not that long ago, trying to get volunteers in town. We've done everything that we can. This isn't a North Haven problem. This is everywhere. Any community, any organization that you look at right now are struggling to maintain volunteers, yet we rely on them as much as we do. I'm concerned about where we're going to be moving forward. I'm concerned about what's going to happen this year with Northeast when we drop down to 4 volunteers, and we need to really start taking some conscious efforts here to make improvements. So this wasn't always a problem. When the career staff was assembled, and there were 28 firefighters, 28 career firefighters, 7 per shift in 1974, they were intended to supplement the volunteers. We've been over aspects of this before, but I want to cover it again real fast. So 7 firefighters responded out of headquarters with 3 apparatus. From 1974 until about 2006, we were able to have 2 engines respond from each of the 3 stations. Each engine sat 6 seats, and so arguably you would have 6 and 6 from each station. You'd have 12 firefighters responding from each station, each of the 3, meaning we could have 36 volunteer firefighters on scene in a matter of minutes. When they ran out of seats on the engines, depending on the type of call that it was, they would get in their car and they would drive to the scene, which is why you see 43 plus firefighters on scene within 10 minutes. Since about 2006, we're no longer seeing that. In 10 minutes time now, the best that I can assure you that's going to happen, and this is assuming there's no other incidents taking place in town. So no recurring incidents, no overlapping incidents. The best that I can tell you sitting here is 10 firefighters in 10 minutes. It's a lot different than 43. For 1974 to 2009, we maintained 7 firefighters minimum. In 2009, there was an effort to go with an ALS service, and so we hired 4 firefighters, 1 per shift, but we kept that 7 firefighter minimum. We went to 8, we dropped down to 7. We expanded our service to ALS, but we kept our minimum at 7. From about 2012 to 2016, depending on what was taking place, we went to 8 minimum during the day, 7 at night, to where gradually in 2016, I met with Mr. Frieda, and we talked about making it 8 firefighter minimum around the clock. And so in about 2016, that occurred. From 2019 to 2013, we hired 2 firefighters per shift. That brought us to 10 firefighter minimum to where we are today. So again, 10 firefighters in 10 minutes with no other incidents occurring is a lot different than what we had up until 2006-ish, when we had 43 plus firefighters showing on scene. So what does this do? This impacts our operations greatly. Not only do we have a number of incidents occurring simultaneously, you go back to that last slide I showed, I didn't talk about it, but it showed how many incidents are occurring now compared to even what it was years ago. We have too much reliance on volunteer firefighters. There's 3 engines in a truck that they're still expected to respond with. As you can see with the roster size, they're not going to get out every time. This is not their fault. This is by no means a product of their commitment or their passion to serve the community or the town. This is simply a numbers game. The rosters that used to have 35 on a roster are down to 10 and 14, 6 and 14. They're not going to be able to respond 100% of the time with the staff that they once did. But yet we still rely on 3 engines in a truck to come from our volunteers, and they're not getting out half the time. And if they do get out, unfortunately it's taken 20 plus minutes to assemble the response. It's taken 20 plus minutes for enough of the volunteers to get there, because we're not going to allow a volunteer to respond by themselves. That doesn't do me any good. Need at least 2, and I ask for 3. But if there's nobody else coming, then we'll allow the apparatus to leave with 2. So what's happened is we have so many incidents occurring at one time that we're dispatching the volunteers, but yet we know they're likely not going to get out. So they're becoming placeholders. And so the CAD's looking to recommend what apparatus is next, and the CAD sees all the career staff are tied up, right? We run 2 engines, a rescue and a truck on the career side, so only 2 calls deep, and we're relying entirely on volunteers. And so the CAD recommends we're going to dispatch a volunteer engine. So the CAD dispatches a volunteer engine, then we wait. And we wait and we look to see, are they going to have a response or they're not going to have a response. That's the current fire department right now. And so what we try to do, we try to scramble, the career staff try to scramble with whatever scene they're tied up to right now, whatever they're on scene of, to try to get out of there as fast as they can to get to the next incident. It's not uncommon for our career staff to do 4 or 5 calls in a row and be gone for hours. Just one highway response, as we talked about, can cripple the response capability of our department. I have to put the career staff on the highways, because Up until recently, and the commission is aware of this, we are dispatching almost a 50-50 arguably, 50% career, 50% volunteer. Because of volunteers getting out so few times, the career staff that was on scene wasn't getting the protection set up on scene on the highway because we were waiting so long for a volunteer apparatus to get there. By the time they would sign on, we'd be practically clearing the highway. And so we had to set it up where now we're dispatching just career apparatus to the highway to make sure the scene is safe. Undoubtedly, has to be safe. We don't have half an hour to work with. The traffic just gets worse. And so we're finding now that we need to be able to handle multiple incidents. And so the increase for staffing that I'm about to talk about is twofold. It's to cover additional responses occurring in the community and to provide those number of firefighters on scene.
Chief, could I just ask, what
Sure.
what is your current average response time?
It depends on the incident.
No. I'm saying, say, for the last year.
I can find that number for you.
Okay.
But we run it based
In
on
the past, you've presented it, so that's why I
Yeah.
ask. Okay.
So let's talk about NFPA for a moment. So National Fire Protection Agency is what the NFPA stands for. It is a consensus national standard. The NFPA, there's dozens and dozens, there's hundreds of standards that are written by NFPA. They're consensus documents. They are documents that are not written by the union, not written by labor, not written by government solely. They're basically written by all these different organizations that comprise of science, labor, management, and these are best practices. So in this town, we adhere to 1710, which requires 15 to 17 firefighters on scene within 10 minutes, 90% of the time. This standard is written specifically for a 2,000 square foot house with no basement and no exposures. That is how many firefighters are needed to arrive on scene in order to effectively manage that incident. If we look at apartments or condos, which we have a lot in town, that would require 28. Now these are 28 to be dispatched. 28 to a strip mall, 43 to a multi-story building, typically an apartment complex. Right now, with us being able to provide only 10 firefighters on scene in 10 minutes, we're unable to fulfill some of the critical functions on a fire ground that we need to fulfill. So I'm not able to necessarily search every floor right away for occupants. And if we are able to search a floor, I'm not able to assemble a crew right away to go do a secondary search because you always want a different crew looking a second time than the first crew. We're not able to fulfill functions like a safety officer on scene to make sure that somebody's walking around that incident the entire time and making sure that all actions taken are safe. We're not able to do things like exposure control. Think about some of the houses that have been built in town, how close they are to each other. I don't want to call out neighborhoods, but we can probably think about a few. We can't necessarily control the fire in the house and the fire next door to the house at the same time with 10 firefighters. Because again, I keep talking about 10, but we have to assume that they're all available when they are dispatched. Mutual aid, unfortunately, takes more than 10 minutes to arrive on scene within town. And so when you look at that standard that we have to adhere to, we're not getting there. What's happening right now is the fires that I respond to, I arrive on scene, I see all these roles that need to get done, and there's nobody to do it. There was, not that long ago, with 43 plus firefighters arriving on scene, there was more than enough help. We could handle multiple incidents, and we could handle pretty large fires. But now I'm arriving on scene, and I look at this checklist of mental checklist of things that have to get done, and I look, and there's nobody coming. And then the firefighters that are there, they're coming out, they're already down one bottle of air. They're already out of air from the one bottle they wore in. And so now we have one more bottle left. I have 2 bottles for every firefighter. That's it. They have 1 bottle left. We put them in a second bottle, and we tell them, go back to work. That's like finishing a marathon, getting a 10-second break, and saying, go run another one. And so we're finding that our scenes are becoming inherently unsafe because we're asking firefighters to do more and more, be multitasking, and we're asking them to do the job of 2, 3 people at a time. The standards that we're talking about here, 15 to 17 firefighters, they don't necessarily account for weather extremes. So if it's really hot out, we're going to go through firefighters even more. If it's really cold out, we're going to go through them even more. We've relied more and more on mutual aid. In turn, we have to provide more mutual aid. So I want you to think about when we are asked to provide an engine and or a truck to a neighboring community, what we're left with. So 2 engines, a truck, and a rescue is what's staffed with career. When we're asked to provide an engine and or a truck to a scene outside of our town, we have left an engine and a rescue. to respond to all of our incidents. What we do is we put the volunteers on standby. We ask them to respond to their stations. We ask them to start standing by for any other incidents. One of the chiefs, every single time that happens, one chief is responding to the town that we're going to, and one chief is starting to make phone calls and make sure that we have our stations covered. Most of the time, we do, but it's a very, very small crew. It's 2 or 3 at each station. And we're struggling to necessarily, it makes us nervous every time we provide mutual aid, because I know that what we have left to assemble is pretty small.
How often, like, do you have an idea, like, if you average it over a year or months, how often, percentage-wise, do you get calls for?
It's about 1 or 2 times a month.
Is it mostly to North Branford?
No, in fact, it's hardly ever to North Branford. Yep, it's mostly to Wallingford and Hamden, Meriden, sometimes New Haven. So what we're looking for are the 4 firefighters in this year's budget to start to make an impact on the staffing. We really need to start to look to staff Northeast with another engine, and we need to start to look at bringing on additional firefighters per shift. My goal for this department is to get this shift strength to 14 to 17 per shift. If you go back to that standard of 15 to 17 firefighters on scene within the first 10 minutes, getting our shift strength to 14 to 17 allows us to pretty routinely do that, minus subsequent recurring calls that are taking place, and allows us to necessarily to have maybe one engine to respond from another town. The problem I have right now is to get that number, I have to call in so many other towns for help, because I just don't have that number of personnel on scene. It's too much of a gap. If I'm providing only 10 firefighters on scene and I need 15 to 17 to start making an impact on a single residential house, I'm already at a gap. It's really hard to make up. I have to make up the gap for the response to the fire, and I have to start thinking about what else I need to provide to the community for other calls that are occurring.
So Chief, this is payroll cost, correct?
That's correct.
So turnout gear, SCBA's, the other kind of things we've talked about, if you were to be granted this request, what about the cost of those items?
So turnout gear is built into that $300,000. The equipment in the SCBA is already all there. And so we're talking about putting career staff, anytime we talk about adding career staff, it's adding career staff in place of the volunteers. So there's no additional apparatus that needs to be purchased. We're basically taking apparatus that the volunteers once responded on and assigning career staff to it instead.
And I'm sorry, you said the turnout gear is included in here, and you have some SCBA's they could use?
The SCBA's are assigned to the apparatus, they're not assigned to
the
personnel.
apparatus, okay, right. Thank you.
So when we look at the future, the apparatus line, I'm sure as this board is aware, right now is struggling to the apparatus repair line. In fact, I think as we sit here today, that repair line is about to go over budget, and we still have several months left to go in this fiscal year. It's because we have a very aging fleet in the department. We were supposed to have 2 engines be delivered almost a year ago. We're still not expecting them for another few months, and so we've had to carry over quite a bit of expense in repairing the apparatus fleet that we have. We're also incurring a $3,000 a month cost to lease an engine in order to keep enough engines in town. And so that was not budgeted for either. So that's $36,000 coming out of that apparatus maintenance line to fund the leased engine.
But that's because you're waiting for 2 engines, right?
Because we're waiting for
The 2
2
that
engines.
were on lease, we actually haven't gotten yet, right?
Correct. So as soon as those 2 come in, we'll pull the lease back.
Okay, we can do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's set up. At this point, we're month to month.
Okay.
We need to look at future economic growth. And so you hear me talking about how many firefighters we need to assemble on scene for a residential house. We need to start really looking at how much more of these multi-story apartment complexes that we want to take on in our town if we know that that is going to require dozens of firefighters to respond. And we only have 10. If there is no change made in terms of personnel to the department, then we need to start to redefine community expectations of the fire department. That's going to be a hard thing for us to do, because I think that when the town residents call 911, they're expecting somebody from the fire department to be there. And I'm not sure that I can necessarily provide that moving forward without some really serious changes to the department. There's going to be significant delays, and if we do arrive on scene, I can't necessarily tell you there's going to be enough staff showing up to make a difference. Our volunteer firefighters are going to continue to decline unless we take immediate steps to lessen the impact of the number of calls they have to respond to. It becomes too burdensome. When you start looking at 400 or 500 incidents we're asking volunteers to respond to, that's more than a call a day. It's too much. It no longer becomes something that they want to do and they put some time aside to do. It now becomes something that's a burden for them. And, you know, unfortunately, in the midst of where we sit here now in 2024, we have to look at some of the things that are happening. And with EV cars and with the lithium-ion batteries in our homes and in our communities, we're seeing one more significant fire hazard occurring every day. We had a lithium-ion battery in a commercial shopping plaza a couple of months ago, and it could have gotten pretty bad pretty fast. If the door wasn't closed to the office where this fire was occurring, we had a pretty large fire in a shopping plaza. And so we're seeing it happen every day. We're seeing it happen in all these departments.
Excuse me, Chief, are there specific equipment needs that we have relative to the rise of the use of EVs?
So the only thing that we've purchased is a blanket. And so when you look at EV cars, there's mixed ideas out there. I think it depends a lot on where the fire's burning. And so the amount of water that it would take to put an EV car fire out, it would be 30, 40, 50,000 gallons of water. So think about it, every engine carries about 1,000 gallons of water, some 750. So think of how many tanks of water that is. The idea is that for the most part, an EV car, you would let it burn. However, you can't always do that depending on where it is. So let's say that it's in a parking garage and it's parked in the lower level of a parking garage. We're not going to let that car just burn. And so that's where the blanket comes into play.
Right.
And so we have different devices we can deploy to control that depending on where it is.
Okay, thank you.
My 5-year capital should be before you. This is how the 5-year capital looks. And that completes my presentation.
Then I would open up to the members for any questions from the chief, please.
Do we know
well-
if there's any grants out there for any of the equipment or anything like that that we can go after?
So there are some grants. We've been unsuccessful so far. We wrote a grant most recently for radios because we're trying to improve our radio functionality on fire scenes because when we respond mutual aid to a lot of other towns, every one of our surrounding towns are in a different type of radio, unfortunately. And so the radios that we need in order to be able to talk to all of our surrounding towns, they're about $8,000 a piece. So it's about $400,000 just in radios for us to be able to talk to our neighboring towns. So we put a grant in for that recently. It was not accepted, and we put a staffing grant in through FEMA, through SAFER, and that was not approved either. So unfortunately, we have a really hard time with grants considering all the pluses that our community has, how financially well off our community is. It's pretty tough to be eligible for grants.
You know, when we were eligible for a grant 6 years ago, the chief had the foresight, as a result of Mike's recommendation, to do an analysis of the department's needs. And so 6 years ago, that analysis took place. We did apply for a SAFER grant. We were granted the grant at that point for 16 firefighters, which raised a firestorm in town. Thinking about hiring 16 firefighters was just something that folks couldn't get their arms around. When you look at it retrospectively, had we taken advantage of that grant, which the federal government would have underwritten the cost of the first or second year of expenses, we would not be in such a pickle as we are in today from the personnel standpoint, considering the decline of the volunteers. So, and unfortunately, when we've applied for the most recent grant, as the chief indicated, for other equipment or personnel, you know, they're looking at us as a AAA bonded community, a very financially successful town, and there are other communities that have greater needs than ours in their wisdom. So it's a pretty difficult situation. The other thing that, the chief has brought to our commission's attention most recently, and he did a general overview of what the needs of the department are. And much of that has been presented here today. But, it's truly a need in order to deliver the quality customer service to the residents of the town of North Haven, and based on what the residents' expectations are of emergency services. And again, as the chief indicated, when someone calls 911 because their mom or dad or baby needs assistance, their expectation is that we're going to respond, and there's the possibility that we will not be able to do that. I think that is something that is very alarming to our commission, certainly, and it should be alarming to every resident in this town. And I'm just hopeful that your commission will take up this request in the very serious manner that it's been presented and endorsed by our commission to perform the duties that we see fit and that the residents expect. So the white paper that the chief created for us was very eye-opening. It wasn't new to the commission, but seeing it all on a two-page document was very informative for us, and I think very alarming. I think my colleague will absolutely concur with that.
Yes, and I think the 4 firefighters, I think one thing that's really important to keep in mind is last year, the 2 that were requested were removed because of the idea that we might get the SAFER grant. So there were no firefighters added last year, so that needs to be clear, that they were asking for 4, but last year, when the request came in, and it seemed that this board agreed, that actually got removed. So last year, there were no new firefighters, and so this year we're asking for 4. And given all of the information that the chief has provided, there's more critical need for it than even last year, so.
And I appreciate the fact that we're requesting 4 firefighters in this year's budget. And when you look at the continued decline of volunteers and the proposal to open Northeast as a full-time fire station, the expectation will be that we're going to need to accelerate that number of firefighters that we're going to be requesting in order to truly have an active open fire station on Washington Avenue. With all of the economic development that has been developed there, and thank goodness that we have that in town, and thanks to Mike and the economic development team, we need to be able to provide the kind of services that those businesses were promised that we would be able to deliver, and that the residents in that part of town will be able to receive. So you need to keep that in mind as well. We don't have 5 years to hire 2 firefighters per year in order to reach our goal. We need to take the step that many of our neighboring towns have taken. When you look at North Branford or Branford, they brought on copious amounts of firefighters at one time, not 2 at a time as we have been doing, and we've been grateful to have that happen. But we're at a point now in time where we need to bring on numerous firefighters in order to reach our goals to deliver the quality customer service, again, that our residents expect.
And I
Thank you,
would
Pat.
say it's
Thank you,
quality
Jen.
customer service, but it's also, you're talking more life and death kinds of things,
Right.
so.
So with the 4 additional firefighters and the way you run the shifts, A, B, C, D, or however you run them, 24-hour shifts, that allows for 1 more firefighter per shift?
We would probably look to staff 1 more engine. So similar to what we did with Monolese, where over the period of time, 1 year at a time, we added 1 shift ability to be able to respond with an additional engine. We'd be looking at something very similar to that.
Right. So what I'm saying is that in order to get 1 more firefighter per shift, you would need 4 total, not 3.
Right, but we would likely do one shift at a time. So that's what we do with Montauk. And so we didn't, every time we hired with Montauk, we wouldn't necessarily spread it out. We would staff enough on one shift to have that one shift run operationally better than the other 3 shifts. And then with the next year, other 2 shifts.
Yeah.
Be something very similar to that.
Yeah, no, is it A, B, C, D, or just A,
It's
B,
1,
C?
2, 3, 4. It's the same thing, yeah.
It's 4, okay, four total
shifts.
shift designations all the time. Then to get from 10 to a minimum of 14, you would be asking for 4 more firefighters for the next, each year for the next 4 years.
So 14 would be the minimum. Yep,
But there's already 2 shifts that are at 11.
correct.
Remember that.
Okay.
2 shifts at 11, 2 shifts at 10
That's correct.
currently. And Jenny, to your point, while in the current fiscal year, we did not add 2 more firefighters, in the previous fiscal year, there were 2 new firefighters added half year. So in the current year, they're actually full-time. So there is actually a blip in them becoming full-year firefighters, as
Now-
opposed to half-year in the
Now, I would
previous
ask
year.
that as well, thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
Is if there's going to be an effort here to hire additional firefighters, we really need to hire in July. Hiring in January is really difficult. If you look at the way that most paramedic programs run, they typically graduate in the spring, like a college semester does. And so we need to try to grab paramedic firefighters as they're graduating, not 6 months after they graduate. They've typically already been hired.
But even with that, you've still had difficulty hiring people right out of the academy, even when you've had the budget, just because there's competition, there's fewer people going to the academy, et cetera.
Far less people that want to be firefighters today than there ever was.
Right, even though we're effectively hiring them in some cases first and sending them to the academy, as opposed to trying to catch them after
So we've
they're
done it
leaving.
both ways. So we'll try
Done
to
both.
hire what we call lateral firefighters, in which we try to bring firefighters on that are already hired in another town. We were unsuccessful in having any qualified lateral candidates apply a few months ago. And so now we try to hire either EMT firefighters, or we always try for paramedic firefighters, but the list is very, very small.
Got it.
And when you look at the time frame, as the chief is indicating, so you hired a firefighter or a paramedic, and depending on when the fire academy takes place, right now the fire academy begins on February 14th, I think, is the 15th is the date. So if we hired somebody today, they're not going into the academy until the February. So if they are qualified as a paramedic and a fire one, certainly they could work on shift until the fire academy begins, but they will have to go to the fire academy.
Understood.
Are we running two rescue trucks all the time and no backup, or 2 and a backup?
So it's 2 engines, a rescue, and a truck is what you're running at all times.
2 engines, a rescue, and a truck. So one rescue.
One rescue.
One rescue.
Oh, I thought that the second vehicle was down in Montauk, the second rescue truck that
Yeah. It's a second
was
engine.
operational also.
It is operational, but it's a second engine, not a second rescue. So you have an engine, a truck, and a rescue in headquarters, and an engine at Montauk that are staffed.
So to that point, I'm sorry, are you finished?
Do you believe our department should have 2 rescue vehicles available at all times?
No, the more pressing need is to have the engines, because the fire is growing exponentially out of control until the arrival of a water resource on scene. The rescue arriving on scene first can't make an impact on fire, but we are able to put a paramedic on the engine, like what's happening now, and have just as much of an impact on the medical emergencies.
Some of the money, I think, I believe in the last round of bonding included a rescue truck. Is that correct?
I think it's through ARPA.
No, ARPA. ARPA? Okay.
Yes. So you're getting a new ambulance, correct?
In ARPA, we received 2 staff vehicles, and was there an ambulance? I think there was an ambulance in there.
For sure, yeah. So again, just playing out different scenarios, not trying to tell anyone how to do their job, but have you considered, rather than incurring the cost of $250,000 in converting and then unknown cost of maintaining a third career firehouse, would it perhaps be more cost-efficient to simply, as Mr. Hallahan suggested, activate an ambulance out of Montauk?
No, I don't think that it would be, because if you look at time distance travel specific to fire incidents, think of what's happening on the north end of Washington Avenue right now. The facilities that are being built and that are there already, the apartment complexes and so forth, we need the ability to rapidly combat fire as soon as it occurs. And so if we're arriving with a rescue, it's not making a difference in the fires. And so we're tasked with two things, right? We're tasked with the EMS response and the fire response in the community. So we need to make sure that we're able to combat both. So I can very easily put a paramedic on an engine and satisfy both components. If I bring a rescue, it can't satisfy the fire suppression component.
Maybe it's a good time to ask the first selectman what additional economic development he's expecting up that end of town.
Yeah, that'll tie nicely into how the chief has presented these requests. So let's start from let's start from the fairgrounds. So this year, we'll probably break ground on a fairground site at the old Donato's. Diagonally across the street, you're going to see at the old Parisi Motors, you probably see some tanks there now, a major new format with a store and a gas component that can best be described as similar to what you would see in a Cumberland Farms, but probably larger, which is a tremendous traffic generator. Connex, I'm working with the CEO, Frank Mancini, to open up the new addition to Connex. The addition will be a branch, credit union branch, tied into the administrative offices that are next door. In the back, there's 88 apartments being built. The 225 apartment, that project that I've been working with the Bigliottis, that right now, one of the three buildings is fully occupied. The other two should be fully occupied probably by the end of 2024. Over at the old produce store, I have an upscale limousine company going there. You're going to see that start very soon. It might have just started, actually. So there's going to be more people and more traffic there. I don't have a solution yet for the next door, which is the old Sips Coffee Shop, but that's another project that I'm working on. I'm working with John Orsini at the old site of the old Dino's over there in Kimberly Plaza. So that empty, vacant part of land that used to be the Dino's restaurant that we relocated diagonally down across the street, that's a project that Mr. Orsini and I are going to be talking about. And over in the front of Amazon, I'm hoping to break ground this year on something, sort of a retail plaza there on the north side of Amazon's driveway. On the south side of Amazon's driveway, I think sometime in mid-year we'll probably break ground on another project there. And that does not include the expansion that we've worked with the BMW Mercedes dealership, a 15,000 square foot building, which is a combination of a Sprint van service building and a combination of a certified pre-owned BMW Mercedes adjunct distributorship. And then I was with Mike Morrow there a couple of weeks ago, and they're expanding off the 15,000 square feet. So from exit 13 to exit 12, there's going to be an explosion in the next 12 to 18 months of economic development.
I'm going to need a bicycle.
Because you live right there, in the circle, right? So.
You know, when you look at the car dealerships and the electric vehicles, that all of those car dealerships are now selling and have in stock, all the more we need to have the fire protection in close proximity to that geographical area to be able to be able to fight those fires. It's going to be quite a challenge. And with the economic development continuing to explode down there, and Mike, you've done a marvelous job in doing so, our fire service needs to grow in proportion to the economic development. And I think it certainly has been lagging as far as our commission is concerned. And I think that it bears fruit to that as to what our presentation is today. So we're trying to catch up. There's been some kicking the can down the road, and we understand why. From the budgetary standpoint, but time has come, I think, to catch up. So I'm hopeful that your commission will take our proposal seriously and move forward with our proposal.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you for your time.
I think the problem with putting the staff in Montauk is, and I can attest to how long it takes to get from one end of town on Washington Avenue to get down to the Monterey station. There's a time delay because of the traffic, and the busyness on the road. So I think that in terms of looking at response time, which is so important when you're dealing with fires and car accidents and things like that, the problem with putting stuff down in Monterey is you're then creating a time delay. So in terms of efficiency from the fire department, operational perspective, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, so.
I guess my concern is that 52% of the calls responded to by the fire department are EMS in nature, and yet 4 out of the 5 activated apparatuses are not ambulances.
So I think one of the...
That's not to say that you can't have a paramedic, you can't have someone who's riding on either an engine or a ladder, but I'm just saying in terms of both speed and if the person who's assigned to that ladder truck or that engine is responding to a fire, because that's what the apparatus is intended to do, they're not available to respond to the 52% of the calls that are EMS in nature.
I don't think we're going to be able to convince you of this otherwise. In the 2020 workshop, you asked what the tactical difference was for an engine leaving the Monterey side of town, going to the south side of town, versus an engine leaving headquarters. We discussed that in 2020. The same thing still stands now, just different end of town.
All right, if you don't mind, I'm going to cut this short. I don't want to stop the members from asking questions, and they certainly can. But let's keep it to the financial side, if we could, please. So I think we should see if there's any more questions by either Nancy or other members. I do know the chief has one more thing he wants to talk about before we close, but we've got the request. I at least understand what he's asking for. Any other questions from the members?
Since we also have expenditure reports we look at every month, the EMT line is completely spent at this point in the year. You did mention that the EMT stipend has increased?
That's correct, yeah.
By what percent?
I believe it was $1,000 per member. It was negotiated in the contract.
Oh.
And so because that's stipend-based, that line's always going to appear 100% spent whenever that stipend is paid out. I believe it's July of the fiscal year, and so that's going...
$1,000 per year?
It was, I believe, $1,000 per member additional, which is...
So did we under budget? Because that's $170,000 we spent on that line.
Yeah, I can take a look at it and see.
Okay.
So it was negotiated...
All right, no, you can get back to us on that.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. 14 paramedics right now, that's about 2 to 3 per shift.
Correct.
What goal would you like there?
Operationally, we need 2, but in order to avoid the burnout and so forth, 3 to 4 is ideal. So again, that number changes, a little bit, but we're at minimum 14, might be a little bit more right now, but 3 to 4 per shift is where we need to be as it stands right now.
Okay. And did you mention how many administrative vehicles we have?
So that's what we're going to cover right now.
Okay, sorry, thanks.
Yep, so Chairman Delaney had asked me to provide a list of apparatus, and so I'm pretty sure I can accommodate the request. I've broken it out so that you can understand it better. So pictured on the screen right now are engines only, and so this is suppression apparatus. These are engines only. And so if you look at rows essentially 2 through 9, these are the engines that we currently have in our fleet. You can see row 5 is not our engine. It's a leased engine at $3,000 a month, and so that one can't really be included, but nonetheless, I was asked, and I wanted to make sure for purposes, transparency, that we reflected it. If we look at the 2000 and the 1994, those are due to be replaced next, just because of age. Those are kind of the big spenders right now, if you will, in terms of apparatus maintenance, and not only that, but downtime as well of that apparatus because they're so old and it's so hard to source parts for. The 1987 was just approved at the last Board of Select meeting to part ways with, and so that'll be going on the GovBid site soon to try to get whatever money we can for it. In 2024, we do anticipate the arrival of 2 engines, and again, that will likely, again, I struggle to say this because I don't want a year from now somebody to say, you didn't do this. As it looks right now, something could catastrophically change with one of the other apparatus. But as it looks right now, we would replace a 2000 and the 1994 with a tuned apparatus. That may change. What I want to point out there as well is a couple of things. So those apparatus were $750,000 each. If we were to buy those apparatus today, they're $1.2 million each. They've gone up $500,000. I can't control that, and it's something that every community is wrestling with right now. And so having said that, in looking at the cost increase and knowing how much they're going to continue to increase, so they're going up roughly 5% every 90 days. The first selectman and I had a conversation recently, and we've agreed to, at no obligation and no money to the town, to at least get in production another engine at this point that we don't expect to take delivery to until sometime in 2028. But the great thing about this is we locked in at today's price. So whatever it continues to go up by in the next 4 years, we locked in at today's price at no expense to the town. And so we're just forecasting out what our fleet needs may be in 4 years. You can see in 4 years, 2004, as we sit here today, is 20 years old. In 4 years, it'll be 24 years old. But really, the life expectancy of an apparatus is 25 years, and it should be out of your fleet altogether.
Well, if I could just tie into that, I estimate that in 2028, that $1.2 million apparatus will increase by well over $900,000.
It's amazing how much they're increasing by. To further break out some more apparatus, these are the apparatus assigned to the Fire Marshal's Division.
Excuse me, Chief, could you just go back one slide?
Sure.
So when those, knock on wood, when those two leased engines come in, where will they go and what will be replaced?
So as you can see here where it says assign the unit, they're interchangeable. The engines are interchangeable. The engines go to different stations depending on what the needs are. And so the number of engines is what's going to stay the same. And so they'll be placed wherever they're needed. We have 2 engines at Montauk, 2 engines at West Ridge, 2 engines at headquarters, and an engine in a truck at Northeast. And so the engines are interchangeable.
So you're not retiring any, that is not the plan, to retire any of those at any age, including the 1994?
Well, I
guess
wouldn't say that. I don't say that
That's my
the
question.
plan is to not retire them. We will likely go to the Board of Selectmen and ask to sell one of those or both of those as well. The idea here is that one of those really should now start to become a training engine for us, like we've talked about in the past, which is part of the reason why we're building that 4-bay garage, is to facilitate an engine that's no longer necessarily new enough or worthy enough to be a frontline apparatus for us, but it is something that we can pull the equipment from and pull water from and so forth, and not have to impact our in-service fleet. And so one of those likely will go there, one of them will likely be sold, but I can't predict what the Board of Selectmen will approve.
Right, so where it says to be replaced in that last column,
In
that's
2024.
likely where they'll go. And then those 2 either will be kept on site for training or sold?
I can imagine
or-
keeping 2. I can imagine only keeping 1. 1 will probably be sold, 1 will probably be kept for training.
Okay. And what will be going in this proposed garage that you got the grant for?
Sure, so it's looking into the future, so it's a 4-bay garage. My anticipation is that we put a training engine there, the CERT bus there right now, and it's, from there, I don't know.
Okay.
It's great to plan
That's
for
my
the future
question.
and have some growth.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding the Fire Marshal's office, there are some vehicles assigned there as well. This is what we have assigned. The 2011 Ford Crown Victoria was also recently approved by the Board of Selectmen to part ways with, and so that is a retired police vehicle. That'll no longer be there. You can see here a 2017 International. That is our fire investigation unit. That is an old rescue that we took out of service because it was no longer reliable. The engine was failing on it routinely and becoming more and more unreliable for emergent response. We converted that into an investigation unit so that now when we respond to incidents and there is a fire scene investigation having to take place, we have a computer there, we have a printer there, we have documents there that we can start to have witnesses sign so that we can conduct searches. We have someplace warm or cool, depending on the time of year, to put individuals who are subject of a house fire in a location where we can begin to talk to them about, how the fire started, what did they see. And so that's a great resource for us to have. And then the 2 vehicles that are assigned to the part-time and the full-time fire inspectors, fire investigators, neither of those are take-home vehicles. They use those only when they're at work. Rescues are pictured there. We have the two rescues, a 2020 and a 2013. Aerial trucks are pictured here, a 2018 and a 2008. The 2008 is a used truck that we purchased for only $300,000, probably about 5 years ago. If you look at what that would be worth today, I guess it's an investment. But we purchased that as a means of replacing an engine that was no longer in service, and I'd advocated for a second truck to be available to our residents. And because when our main truck goes out of service, we need a second aerial to be able to fall back on to place in service. And so in talking with First Selectman a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about looking into 4 to 5 years into the future, one of the things that was proposed at that time as well was getting at least our names associated with the production of an additional ladder truck. And so that ladder truck wouldn't be here until 2026. And so that would start to really shore up where we are, because of 2008, while it's used and it's in great condition, it is something that we need to start to plan for. It was a short-term fix. We spent $300,000 and it got us through the last several years, and it will get us to 2026. But it was a short-term fix at that time.
Chief, I'm sorry, the last item is what's the last item there?
That's
the future?
That's future.
Okay, thank you.
No money, no.
Yeah, okay.
From an admin standpoint, these are our admin vehicles. There's a deputy, 2 deputy chiefs, and myself. We have 4 vehicles assigned to us. One is in a reserve status at all times, so that if we have brakes that need to get replaced, transmission, I mean, the one that's a spare, you see 2018, it's on its 3rd transmission. I mean, so when we drop out with these cars, I need to be able to still mobilize myself or the 2 deputies, because we are the ones that are responding to town for any major incidents, fatalities, mutual aid responses to other towns. One of us is always on call. A second of us is typically available to be able to respond back to town and to manage the incident, manage the town, respond with our firefighters to our town, whatever it may be.
And Chief, the 2 that were funded via ARPA that were referenced earlier, is the 2023 one of them, or
The 2023 is one that was funded through ARPA, and another that was funded through ARPA was this 2019 Jeep Cherokee. That was used.
Okay, thank you.
The 5-year-old vehicle's on its 3rd transmission?
Yes, sir.
Did we get unlucky there?
Very unlucky. Yeah, you can go back and look at the building maintenance, the apparatus maintenance line.
Yeah.
I believe 2 years ago, we spent $8,000 on transmission on that again.
And, yeah, oh, all right. I won't ask you about warranty coverage, but okay.
Yep, I understand.
Sure.
And then the last section I have for vehicles to kind of break it out and make sense of this is our support vehicles. We have 2 off-road vehicles. We refer to them as Gators, or John Deere Gators. They're basically, off-road golf carts. The CERT bus and a utility truck that we use to bring 2 to 3 large trailers. We have 2 trailers in town with a lot of equipment on them that require a very heavy-duty truck to be able to pull. One of them is several thousand pounds and needs quite a lot of weight in order to pull it. It has a lot of our hazardous materials equipment in it, so suits and meters and decon equipment and so forth. All really heavy material that we need to be able to have a utility truck to bring that to our scenes. And that is our apparatus throughout the entire department.
When that utility truck is not hauling the trailers, how else is it used?
It's used regularly. If I remember correctly, when we advocated for this, we have to take care of all of our own recycling, for example. And so instead of putting the recycling in the back of an ambulance where we put patients, we take that truck to the recycling center and get rid of recycling. We use it for fire scenes to go pick up dirty hose, so we're not putting dirty hose back in apparatus. I mean, there's a lot of things we use it for. It's used almost every day.
Right.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you to our board members. Any final questions from the members before we break?
Medical billing has improved, and fire fees have improved. So
they have. So the fire fees are direct line to the building taking place in town. The medical billing is
for transport.
We do transport at times if there is no other ambulances available to respond, or if the ambulance has taken too long to arrive to scene, we will transport, and then we will also still assist to the hospital at times.
Yeah, those numbers have improved.
And at least 22, 23, the the overtime seemed quite high, and at least as of the end of November, is a little bit on the high side. Is there
the overtime or the contractually placed staff?
No, overtime.
The overtime?
Which is usually not as you know.
So what's happening right now, and that's going to likely continue to increase, is as we start to look at the lack of volunteers in the community, if we call back volunteers for standby and there's no volunteers coming, I can't just say, well, I hope nothing comes in for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. I have to hire career staff back. And so that line's going to continue to increase because I need to be able to put firefighters on call here in town to cover other incidents. And so in large part, that's going to happen more and more.
So even with the 11-man shift, that hasn't been sufficient?
No, because 11 firefighters still only allows me to mobilize 4 apparatus.
Understood. I just have one last question for the chief. Since you're very familiar with all the local fire departments, are you aware of any other Connecticut towns that are similar in population size to North Haven that have 3 career firehouses? And second part of that is, are you aware of any that are actually able to achieve the NFPA standards that you mentioned for this fire scene?
Sure. So the caveat in it that you had, which is not a good representation to compare it to, is similar population.
Yes.
Population is a metric in which to predict call volume. When the call volume is already occurring, there's no longer a need to consider the population. Our call volume is what it is. We can't do anything about it. Population is one predicator of how many incidents to expect, as is highway, as is population density, as is age of the population, as a number of other things. And so to take that and say, hey, what does your department look like compared to other towns your size, that's not necessarily a good representation. You have to look at what does your department look like in terms of other departments that are running the same calls as you are, or similar calls as you are. What I will tell you is if you look at what's happened in the town of Manchester, for example. Manchester lost the 8th District Utilities recently, which was a volunteer section of their town, and they hired well over 20 firefighters last year to make up for that. So it doesn't matter what the population is, it matters what the incidents are that we're responding to.
So their call volume is similar to North Haven's?
Doesn't matter, the call volume is very similar, yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, if you break it out, sure.
Okay.
Could we get a copy of this part?
The presentation?
Yeah, the whole presentation.
Well, yeah, the whole presentation.
The whole presentation would be great.
Ingrid, would
Ingrid could
it be
get
okay
it.
if they send that to you, Ingrid?
Yeah.
And could you send it around to the members?
Sure.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you for those who came and listened. Have a nice Saturday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just remember. TV at your head.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.